and go back in. All right, guys. Looks like we're live. So I just had to it looks like we're live, but no one's on yet. It says 0. So technically, are we really live? Are we live if
if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, did it make a sound?
That's what I was kind of getting at. I mean, who knows? We may just have nobody here the whole time, and in which case, it'll be all the iTuners listening to this thing.
It'd be just like recording the podcast before when we didn't do it live. So I mean, we'd be able to pull it off, but I think it'd be a little disappointing for our guests tonight just to be like talking to their computers. Or I guess they could talk to us. I don't know how much that's worth, but
that's true. We could mess up. We could mess up again like we used to do, and we have to edit it afterwards.
Yeah.
Because no one was here to see it live, but now we're live, so we can't. We gotta
edit anything.
Yeah, all this junk we're talking about right now, this big waste of time. This right here would have been edited out before. But now it's in.
It's in.
It's
already done. It's too late.
Yeah, this is just filler time because we're getting people on here now. There's 11 people on, and if you
guys we're live, I'm just kidding.
There we go. That's the end of the bit. All right, people are making comments. What we need to know. Here's what we need to know. We need somebody to comment from, comment where you're watching it from. Obviously, YouTube. We're getting the YouTube comments showing up here. So YouTube, we're good. But I want to see someone from Facebook. Everyone that's live from Facebook, tell us where you're watching it live. Are you watching live from Drew Gregory personal profile because we're friends? Are you watching from Drew Gregory Fishing, the page, my fishing page, or are you watching from the River Bassin group or page? We need to know where you're listening from or
not location,
viewing from. Yeah, not location.
Fellas and ladies, not location. So what page on Facebook you're watching from?
So Dustin is saying that he's a Drew Gregory. Is that the Drew Gregory Fishing, Dustin, or is that Drew Gregory? Like the personal profile, like we're friends.
Okay, so there's a Drew Gregory. There's a River Bassin. There's
Robert.
Drew Gregory Fishing.
And then Robert Weiker's River Bassin. So the group isn't live. The River Bassin group was having a problem connecting to this, but hey, look, we're streaming in like 5 different places already. So just click over, obviously, to one of the other ones we're on. All right, cool. It looks like we're getting the comments from everywhere because last time we did this, which is such a bummer because, Dr. Steve Salmons, the amazing biologist, fisheries biologist was on, which, by the way, here's some news for everybody listening. I called Dr. Salmons and he has his annual shoal bass meeting tonight. And the state of Georgia, they have a big annual meeting, and I used to go to them. But anyway, he's always a speaker there and is always there. So he couldn't make it, but he wants to come on pretty much every time, almost every time, if he can make it. But here's what else I did, Ken. I'm over here working, dude. I'm working. You don't know, but I'm doing stuff behind the scenes.
On the grind.
Yes, I know. You just, you come on with me. We talk for 5 minutes before this starts. It seems like I'm just scatterbrained. I probably haven't even thought about this all week and all month, right? Until we're on again.
Right.
The next thing you know, it's like
everyone's like, you had a month to prepare. We're like, we really had 15 seconds, guys. Come on, work with us here.
we just wing it. We're just winging it. But I promise you, it's not true. I called my biologist friend in Georgia, another one, Travis. And Travis, I've done been on a shock boat with Travis for shoal bass. We shocked up a ton of huge ones one time, and we're just holding them up on the shoal bass. On this shock boat, it's awesome. And I got to learn a lot about how the shock boats work. And he's done a lot of the work with Dr. Salmons, and is currently working with Dr. Salmons on a project on the Lower Flint River in South Georgia, which is where Travis is based in Albany. So, anyway. He's really good. He's got some good stuff, too. He's a river guy. Now, Dr. Salmons, believe it or not, everyone loves him. We have him on. He knows a lot about rivers, but his whole, education, you know what I mean, all of his to get to this level, it's actually not rivers, it's lakes. And he talks about that when he only learned rivers more once he became a professional, but obviously he's been doing it for a while. So he knows them pretty darn good. But Travis, guys, is a river guy, and he knows a lot about, stocking of shad and the bait fish and the shoal bass, obviously, but that translates to supplemental stockings of smallmouth around the country. There's going to be some cool conversations with Travis.
Knowing an ecosystem is knowing the specific species to the core. It'll give you a ton of information. So that's awesome. That's really something I'm excited to hear about now that you've brought it up.
Yeah, I'm excited to have him on as well. And I think that people on you guys can comment on this. I think people that listen to the River Bassin podcast are a little bit more interested in some of these rare species or just things that I don't know, a lot of the biologists tend to know about. I think we're just more interested in the fish than in the whole, from that perspective, if it makes sense, than some of the other guys. So it's a perfect thing to have on our live stream. Hopefully we can have somebody on almost every time that has a little bit of a background where you can ask them questions, because the more we learn about the fish, the species, and the more we learn about their prey, which is the old Rick Clunn thing. He should have been studying the mouse, not the owl the whole time, which is true. The more we learn about the crawfish and the shad and the brim and the bluegill, whatever, the hellgrammites, the more we certainly will learn about how to catch the bass, which is what we're all after at the end of the day. So anyway, that's exciting. So what's up with you, man? What's the latest?
I'm in preparation mode. I have a trip coming up in about a week that I leave for to go to the Carolinas to hang out for a couple of days and do some fishing down there. And then I leave from there to go to the southern Florida area, Miami area, to do some fun fishing with a good group of friends from Raccoon Creek Outfitters. So we're doing a fun fishing trip down there, probably get into some peacocks, hopefully some snakeheads, some other stuff. So that'll be a fun, relaxing, not relaxing, fun fishing trip before I get geared up to come back, reset for a week, and then go hit Sandy Cooper with you and some other people. So
very cool.
Getting geared up to just jump headfirst in right away here after a long winter rest in Cleveland.
You're right. It's coming in tonight. It looks like for us again. I got to leave tomorrow morning for that Bassmaster Kayak Series Championship down there in South Carolina, where I'll be seeing you. So I'm leaving tomorrow morning. It's crazy. It's already here, dude. I haven't made a cast since KBF National Championship.
Me either, man.
Not one cast. Yep. You either.
Nope.
That's it.
I just see these rods right here behind me.
Yeah.
I just brought those in like last night after I locked up the kayak shed from getting home from the KBF National Championship. So those have been in a dark, cold shed outside for like 4 months. And I was like, I should probably get this cleaned up before next week when I have to leave. So that's on my to-do list back there.
Got to blow the dust off those bad boys.
Get that Louisiana grass out of the inside of those reels or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's funny. I like Chris Bedewitt's comments here. He says, Drew, trophic upsurge Gregory. I'm telling you, I don't know why I love that, like that whole trophic upsurge thing. It just it just clicked with me, and I'm still, by the way, going to go back, guys, and do those River Bassin definitions. I swear, I tried it yesterday. I drove 2 hours away down to see Robert Weicker and drop off my solo skiff to him, which, by the way, you guys are going to go nuts when you see this rig. I got a motor guide, 109-pound thrust, Tour Pro. Technically, it's the Tour. I ordered the Tour Pro. They sent me the wrong one, but whatever. They're going to send me the correct one here soon. It's not going to get here for a few weeks. But for the meantime, I'm running that Tour, 109-pound thrust. It's a regular, bow-mounted motor that kicks down like a bass boat on the solo skiff. Mm-hmm. It's nuts. But anyway, he rigged it all up for me. He and Kyle down there at their shop. He's got a couple hours away. And it looks amazing. They got the live scope on there. So I finally have my live scope from the bass tank that I got from the bass tank last June on there. And it's all like looking money. I joked with Robert. I said, he sent me pictures of it all rigged up. And I said, dude, no one's going to believe that I rigged that. Like once they see how clean it is and how nice it all looks, it's going to be like very obvious. I did not do this.
The fixer had his hands involved, huh?
Yeah, that's right. He's got the fixer. Yeah. That's his nickname.
Real quick, Greg Melgrew. I don't know why you gave us an angry face, but if you need a hug or something or like a pack of baits to make yourself feel better, dude, just hit us up. I don't know why you're giving us angry faces, but on your response there on the emojis, but I don't know what's going on, man, but take care of yourself.
I don't even see that.
It's at the top if you hover over the emoticons on the screen.
If you hover over the I see. He's angry.
Yeah, he gave us an angry face.
He's angry because we're going fishing soon. And maybe
he's jealous? Okay, maybe that's a good angle. That's a good angle.
Yeah. But anyway, back to we get off on these tangents. But what I was saying is I promised you guys the trophic upsurge and all the river bassin definitions. Dude, I tried it. I've been trying to find the best microphone and the ones that actually work. And I finally think I've got the right adapter for the iPhone where I can do voice memos and then transfer them to my – and now here's the cool thing. Tomorrow I leave on a trip for like 8 hours of driving. Going all straight down to Charlotte, staying there, and then I'm doing the rest on Saturday morning to the Airbnb where we're staying there, close to Lake Russell where this championship is. So I've got a ton of time. I'm going to figure this thing out, even if I have to connect it straight to my computer and just have the laptop open next to me and record them. So look for some of those episodes to come in the near future. And anyway, I'm excited about that. Dustin Hoy has a comment here. I want to mention something about this. Dustin says we need to go chase some of those shoal bass, the shoalies as we call them, shoalies.
Agreed.
So you mean to be a local and not let everyone know you're from out of town, Dustin. Of course, they can just look at your license plate. But either way, you got to say, did you guys catch any shoalies out there today? See, there you go. That's the tip there and what they're called. But anyway, we need to go catch some shoal bass. So what we need to do next year to make sure this happens is do I can offer like a big group guided trip for anyone who's never caught shoal bass. You know what I'm saying? Down in Georgia. Yeah. And, Crescent is based there. My family's there. It's a great excuse for me to get down there outside of a tournament weekend. We just need to go down there and have a big, we used to call it back in the day on the GeorgiaRiverFishing.com forums before Facebook eliminated forums. And that website, I don't think it might still be up, but no one really uses it. But we used to do something called the Shoalie Palooza. We should have Shoalie Palooza next year, a big event, a big river bassin event called Shoalie Palooza. We bring people down, and if I'll stay an extra day or two for people who really want one-on-one, guided kind of adventure trips. But the rest of it could just be a big hangout, camp out, get together, and all the folks like Dustin, a lot of the guys, your team member from your shop. I know, the guys at Loveland. Let's get Brad Hicks. Let's get all the guys over there. Anyone who's like from up north who's never caught shoal bass, I can put you guys on all the best sections, the most beautiful sections. You would never think that you're in middle Georgia because there's kind of bluffs and mountains and it's just gorgeous. And let's just go catch some shoal bass.
I'm down. Let's put it on the calendar now. I mean, shoot, we'll talk later, but that's awesome. Let's definitely try to get something like that organized.
I bet Jordan Marshall would like to go on that trip, man. He's in the green room right now.
Yeah, he's in the background, watching us, listen to us talk about nothing, and he's like, "Why am I coming on here?"
Yeah,
off on tangents, rambling.
Well, the last tangent. Sorry, Jordan. I know we're going to get you in here in a second. The last tangent I will say is I just saw a comment from Omar right here. Omar and I did listen. Did you know this was going on, Ken? Omar and I did a virtual lesson.
I did. I meant to ask you about it, but we hadn't been able to catch up, and I didn't want to waste that 15 seconds before we go live to talk about that. So, but yeah, how'd that go?
It went great. Well, maybe Omar should say how it went. Did you learn any? Omar, make a comment. Like, help me out here. Did you learn anything? No, in all seriousness, I know he did. He loved it, and it was exciting. He wants to do more of them. He wants to schedule, more. And even do an in-person guided adventure lesson, kind of like I like to do, really teach people when I'm out there. And so anyway, I think I'm getting nervous. He hadn't made a comment yet, dude. He didn't like my, no, I'm just kidding. There he is. All right. It just now came through. It was a delay. It was amazing. All right. So I'm only mentioning that to say this. I'm not even really promoting this, although me mentioning it, I guess, is sort of promoting it. But it's a busy year, so I don't know how many of these I'm going to be able to do. But I'm offering these virtual lessons. We've talked about it last time on this podcast. So basically, it's just to help speed up people's learning curve and save people a lot of time and money. Because, dude, last time I said this, but I always used to feel bad taking people on guided trips because they're just like, man, like this is just, I do this for fun. I don't even feel like good about taking money for guided trips, even though that's how I started to make this full time for me back, before I got with Jackson Kayak even. And during those first years developing the Coosa where we weren't making any money, I was offering guided trips. But then when I realized how much time and money it can save everybody with how many hours and days on time on the water I've spent to learn all that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, I would much rather, help people, help them save all that time and money spent on and just help them figure it out so they can just get right into, catching a lot quicker. So Omar was one of those folks who happened to notice there was I guess in the news feed for the River Bassin page, it let people know, anyone that was a follower of that page, that we're now taking appointments. So next thing you know, like a few minutes later, I've already got an appointment booked. And I'm like, geez, we're not even advertising this yet. But Omar was right on it. And he's a great dude. And he actually is right there in Georgia. So I know like he said, that's why he would love to be part of that Shirley Palooza. So we should make it happen. But real quick, before we get Jordan on here, if you guys could just click share. Maybe we should start giving away prizes like other other podcasts do, live streams. If you can click share on this for us, let's get some more people in here, because the more questions, more people we have in here, it's just going to be a little bit better discussion. So we're going to have a lot of fun with Jordan tonight, with Bailey when he comes on. And if you guys can do that, that would be awesome. So appreciate all the support. It always helps us out. And
all right, Greg, I was just messing around. You're all good, bud.
Yeah.
Except for Jake Horn. He did it on purpose, and I know it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to some real topics.
Yeah, let's get Jordan on here.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah, we're gonna talk a little river bassing with this guy. There he is. What's up, Jordan?
What's up, guys? How y'all doing?
Hey, Jordan, what's going on, man?
We're doing good. Dude, you look like tell you what, man, your lighting is good. Your hat comes through clear. Like, it's almost like you're taking this to like another level now that you're the AOI champ. It's like, oh man, I gotta get serious about this.
I can't really take credit for that. I'm actually at my girlfriend's house, and I'm borrowing her tripod with her halo light. So I am have a very fancy system tonight, and it is from her.
Oh, gotcha.
Did you do your makeup too?
I'm assuming it was a little touch up. Get rid of the lines there. Right?
Is that what she uses for her TikTok dances? The ring light with the setup you got going there?
I think she does a makeup tutorial. She's working on makeup tutorial.
All right, makeup tutorial. All right.
Hey, plug her. Free plug.
Plug her.
Hey,
oh,
she's giving you equipment to talk to us. Plug it. Get it out there.
Absolutely. Well, she's got you looking good somehow. I don't know, but she it says a lot about her skills right there. So
yeah,
good job.
I try my best. She's helping me out a lot.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, good to hear that's going well. And man, let's just quickly give a little background for those that aren't familiar with you. We brought you on here because we know you're. You do a lot of styles of fishing, lake and rivers, backwaters, but I think probably like me, you prefer kind of moving water or some places that are a little bit harder to access, more challenging.
Yeah.
That's just kind of why I got a kayak, and I think it's kind of probably why you started too. So just real quick, give us a little background on kind of how you got into this and kind of your style of fishing, I guess.
So I got my first kayak when I was 16. It was a Pelican, little cheap molded in Pelican that I got from Academy Sports, and it was really so I could go fish a bunch of farm ponds and stuff kind of around my house. I drove around and fished a bunch of ponds and stuff with all my friends, and got a kayak so I get into those and get into a small river near my house called the Little River, where me and a friend of mine would go and wade, and we could only wade just a small little section that was between two big pools, and we caught a whole bunch of smallmouth through there. So I got a kayak so I could fish it, and fell in love with fishing the Little River, and started my first kayak tournament. Drew actually ran. It was a college kayak fishing tournament at Guntersville, and just kind of fell in love with it. Had some early success with that, and
it's cool to see we impacted at least one college student out there. At least one got somewhere from that series. No, that's cool, man. But sorry to interrupt there.
Yeah, that was my first event. I took a picture with no identifier on it and forgot all about it, and that fish wasn't worth anything, but it worked out okay. Our team won. I finished second. I actually used the black pack. I don't know if you remember, but you had custom black packs made for the teams and individual finishers.
Yeah.
And I actually used that black pack all the way up until about 2 months ago. I used that thing the entire time. I took the lid off of it because I saved it in my little trophy spot. But I kept those the whole time. Everything else from that event, though, I left on the bed of my truck and it actually fell off as soon as I pulled out of that parking lot where we had that check-in that day, and I never saw any of it after that. That was the only thing I kept, and I kept it the whole time.
That's cool, man. That's very cool. Well, and then you went into doing some river bass and stuff, I think.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I fished quite a few river. That was like kind of the first events that I really like kind of traveled for on like a series kind of thing. I ended up going, I think, to Carolinas and watched everybody just absolutely wreck fish over there that year when I think Donald Corbett, when he was still doing 412 Bait Company, had like 70 inches and 3 fish or something absolutely insane. It was one of the most unbelievable things I think I had ever seen. And I was just on the wrong river and I struggled. But, man, that was one of the first events that I went to, and it's like, man, there's a lot of people out here that like just fishing moving water, and it was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. And I wasn't really consistent with getting bites and things like that, but man, you go there, and even when they came to Knoxville, I was really excited about the Knoxville one, and I had no idea who any of those guys were that came in and absolutely dominated. And I was so impressed at that point. And it was sold after that.
Yeah, you became definitely hooked on the rivers, I'm sure, after all that. So that's exciting. I got Scott Butcher's comment up here. He says cash and rods with the those emojis there. Because you got the hat on. Because I know you're on the caching team. Though, just a little side note on caching. I was at the Ken and I were actually, a bunch of us were at this Columbus Fishing Expo, and I was talking to Destin DeMarion and the VP of caching.
Jason.
Yeah.
Jason
and
Holland.
We were talking, and he meant, I told him I was a kayak fisherman or whatever, and he was like, Jordan Marshall. I'm like, yeah, I know him, and he said we just got him on our team. Was a good dude, and I had put in a good word for him with Z-Man too, and he got on the Z-Man team, and we talked about you a little bit there. So, it's always good to see how, things are developing in your career with the sponsors, and after the big AOY win, the Hobie Bass Open Series. So that's pretty cool. But you and I both have one of these, probably. Yeah.
It's not with me now. I'm holding it up.
Yeah.
But with the whole "Let's Go" right there. So.
But anyway, so that's pretty cool to see how you capitalize on that. But I will say this, and you can back me up if this is true or not. Just because you win AOY, I think people just assume that just things are going to fall right in your lap. And it is the farthest thing from the truth. I mean, is it not still so hard to get any traction?
There's a group text that I think it's actually been going off since I've actually been on the show right now. But it's there's a group text with some guys that I respect and we fish with and travel with. And it probably I tried to really kind of capitalize. I was on a lot of those podcasts and stuff just right after Bam Bam Bam. And I really tried to capitalize as much as I could with that momentum. And probably two or 3 weeks went by, maybe a month. And, it's getting kind of late in the year and people were starting to talk about next year. Right. And I sent that group a text, and I was kind of getting down, and I had a slow day at work, and I actually made a meme that was like what you expect to happen after you win Hobie Angler of the Year versus what actually happens. And I think it was the little guy where he's basically standing in the pool kind of looking around, and that's kind of what I felt like. I was like, man, I feel like I was calling people and emailing people and trying to pull strings and go to different people that I knew had really good connections, and I would get on fantastic phone calls that just never amounted to anything. Yeah. And I was like, this is mind blowing to me. And the first thing where it felt like kind of clicked with me, there was a guy, Sean Boggs, who used to do an apparel company, kind of pro staff. It was called Alien Fishing. I actually went to North Sand Mountain High School to talk about bass anglers against bullying with that apparel company. And that was the first time I ever stood in front of anybody and did any sort of seminar. It was, kayak fishing and, how the community with kayak fishing is just so welcoming and so friendly and things. And I don't know if any of those kids ever, got into kayak fishing, but that was one of the cooler things I think I ever got to do, because it was, you always remember the first time you do anything. And that was the first time I ever stood in front of a bunch of people and talked about kayak fishing and all that. And he actually was kind of getting a pro staff together for MTech lithium batteries. And he hit me up and was like, hey man, you have a lithium battery? And I was like, or he said, what battery are you running? I said, no, I don't have the lithium battery.
This one?
He said,
this one?
Yeah. I was like, it was me sticking rods down in the water, seeing how deep it was. And he was like, he's like, you don't run a fish finder at all? And I said, no, I just, I don't use one. I just like something gets in my way. And he said, hey man, we'll think about something you might want to put on your boat and, get a battery and, we'll go from there. And I was like, all right. So I checked and I bought a Newport, and then I got a battery from Intech, and now I'm, electronics on my boat, which I swore I'd never do, but is, more and more, trails kind of open them. It's one of those things where you kind of have to capitalize on what's available to everybody when it's completely fair and legal and, all that kind of stuff. So you don't want to be left behind. So you have to kind of follow what everybody else is doing.
Speaking of bullies, you're getting bullied into electronics.
Yeah.
That's not happening. I've bought electronics, and I've had really nice Lowrance units and really nice Raymarine units and really nice Humminbird units. And I kind of went through a cycle of trying different ones, after, and the only thing I really used them for was, this time of year when we go to like Fork and it gets really cold and those fish suspend, and outside of a month where I really felt like I was getting my money's worth out of it, the only thing I ever looked at it for was water temp. And half the time I can just kind of stick my hand down in the water and just, kind of feel around and be like, okay, yeah, as I'm going back up in this creek, the water's getting cooler. Who would have guessed, you need to go fish some cooler water in the summer, or, things like that. So I don't know.
I'm on the same page as you, man. Like my fish finder, I like always, prep everything for the year, and then by like the second or third month until when it starts to warm up, it usually ends up just in the truck, not on the kayak at all. But it's just a hard habit to break, I guess, for me. But
yeah, I don't like anything being in my way. That's why whenever I did get the Newport, I didn't want the foot controlled steering or anything like that. I like having all my rods horizontal in the Hobie. And I don't really like even having rods vertical in the back, because I like getting places where, a lot of time you're kind of in tight quarters and things, especially like even if you're fishing kind of out in the open and, you're skipping docks or whatever else, and you go up under a dock or go up under a tree, if you get hung or something, then you have to, try to get something unhung. And, there's a lot of little things like that can, kind of start, snowballing down through your day and kind of just throw everything out of whack. And I just like to keep everything as simple as possible for the most part.
Yeah. Sounds a lot like me, man. My setup, it's, identical. I hate stuff sticking up behind me. I make big looping casts, and I hit those things every time if they're sticking up behind me. So I mean, quite frankly, not that there's technically a right or wrong way, but I feel like I cast more, if there is a right or wrong way, it's the right way, like a bass boat angler is up there with all that room, and they're doing these big, you look at Kevin Van Dam, he's got that thing, this big round motion sweeping helicopter. You can't do that in a kayak. I mean, you're going to hit your other rods back there. And the reason he does it, because think about it, he's got all the space and room in the world. So how come he doesn't just go, 12 to 6, right? Just back and forth, like a fly rod.
Keep the momentum as soon as it comes out of the water. Turn around.
Exactly. So he's doing it that way because that's the most efficient way on the, the actual, I don't know what you call it, the actual mechanics of the cast. So he's actually, so that's technically the way, and that's the way I was taught, like, to get it correctly. So that's why it bothers me. I can't do my normal cast, plus the tree limbs and the docks, like you're saying, everything. I want to keep it simple too. We fish a lot, the same, which is why we got you on this podcast here, obviously. But so let's get into people out there watching. You guys feel free to chime in with some questions, and Ken will keep an eye out for some good ones and put them up here.
OG River Bass are joining us in the comments section. Noah.
And Philip Scarce too is probably even further OG than Noah. I mean, that's like back in the Georgia river fishing days. Like I was telling you guys about that forum. And he's down in Florida right right now. I used to live, I think, somewhere else, but good to see Philip on there. And we fished together a few times for sure. But all right, so you capitalize on the momentum. I mean, to somewhat, right? But it's not as easy as people think.
Definitely not.
I struggle with the same thing. I mean, I'll tell you, here's the secret, guys. This is a little bit more tournament and sponsorship talk, and we'll get into river bass and stuff here in a second. But the secret is what you just said, Jordan. It was more about it's like any college student gets a degree, right? You can certainly go and blind apply for jobs, but if you have a friend that works there or someone that can put in a good word for you or reference, those are your best chances, right? Because it's like someone that already works there and knows the person that's making the decision on hiring, or in this case, the person making a decision on sponsoring, that's going to help out a lot. So that's the way, your AOI certainly, it gave me a little bit of the ability to say, to Joey Z-Man, for example, hey, Jordan's a good dude. He's really trying to do this right, and he just won the AOI. And that certainly just helps kind of get there, So
absolutely.
A good example was what Matt Airy, I just got signed on with AFCO and Sunline. So I'll be switching to those this year. I actually didn't have a clothing spot. I mean, I'm sponsored by Real Tree Fishing, and they make stuff, but they're more just a licensing, that pattern. Yeah. But for performance gear, it's AFCO and their board shorts and stuff, and then Sunline. But anyway, I say that to be like, look, I got that because Matt Airy, the Bassmaster Elite Series angler, friend of mine, I was like, hey, Matt, I went up to him this is a funny story. Last year at the Classic, before he finished second, I went up to my contact, the marketing director for Real Tree Fishing, Scott, and I said, look, man, how come Matt Airy isn't on Real Tree's team? I mean, that dude hunts. That's like his he likes hunting more than he likes fishing.
Yeah, he does the Let's Talk Fish podcast.
Yeah.
And Smoke has to give him a hard time, be like, all right, no more hunting. No more
Always.
hunting.
Always. And the people in the chat keep wanting to ask hunting questions, and he keeps trying to answer all those and steer the whole conversation to hunting, because Matt loves to hunt, man. That's his thing. Now, he loves fishing too, obviously. But anyway, he ended up getting, because Scott hadn't really, Matt had great finishes, and he'd won some FLW tournaments, but I don't know if Scott was in that role. And this is just a good example. Even a Bassmaster Elite Series angler that's finishes in like the top 10 in AOI consistently, top 10 to 15. Last year he didn't, but previous years he was always right there, top 10
very
15.
Consistent, yeah.
Marketing, and this isn't even a knock on Scott, because Scott Hughes he knows more and follows more of the trails than anybody out there, and the anglers and the kayak fishing. He knows his stuff. But even he didn't really know a lot about or who Matt Airy was or whatever. And we're talking about an Elite Series angler. So imagine now if it's a Jordan Marshall or Drew Gregory or someone in the kayak fishing world, how less will the marketing directors out there who we just don't have the same, reach or impact as Bassmaster Elite Series guys, right? Or MLF or whatever. So how much less do they know about us? So you can see right now how difficult it was for Matt. Now, Matt, fortunately, got second in that event. And then I called Matt and I said, hey, Matt, it's good timing for you to finish second, because I was just telling Scott, and I don't know if you got to, if you could, if you have a conflict or whatever, but I just threw it out there and said, man, you got to look into adding Matt Airy. And it all kind of lined up, and then they talked, and I got him connected, and Matt sent him a media kit and whatnot. Anyway, he got signed by Real Tree Fishing, and Matt sent me a text, probably 2 months ago and said, hey, man, just inked the deal with Real Tree. Thanks again for that, for that like contact, which he could have got the contact and approached Real Tree Fishing and probably been just as successful, because he's Matt Airy and he's on the Elite Series. But but you get my point. In turn, he had also previously already got me in contact with somebody and put in a good word for me, because he's sponsored by AFCO. And so, but if I don't have that for Matt Airy, it took like a top Elite Series angler with the credibility to stick his neck out and say something good, about me to those guys. And I just now got it worked out. It took me months of like following up, and like, it's just not easy, guys. That's the point. Like this stuff is not easy. And like Steve Fields is saying, that's kind of what we're talking about, Steve. Did winning the Hobie BOS AOI open any doors? It's not necessarily that alone, but it's.
I think it's more or less
for sure.
It opens doors, yes, but it's more or less a
a resume.
Yeah,
builder
it's a
that
resume
helps.
builder. It basically is a light to show you where the doors are, as much as anything. Because you're kind of just trying to walk around and feeling your way out, and you're trying to throw darts at things, and unless you kind of got somebody kind of helping you out and feeling your way through those things, you're never gonna make enough contacts just showing up with no resume to do anything. And you start winning events and win Hobie AOYs, and then you kind of have a direction to go in and figure out, okay, here's what I'm doing, here's what I can bring to the table. And when you do meet, get in contact with the right people, and I mean, Drew, you can probably attest to this, whether it's rods or kayak companies, when you talk to those people, you almost know immediately that is going to work out in a positive manner.
Yeah, no, you're right. It does. And it gives you, like Steve's saying, I mean, you'd rather have the AOI and the wins, obviously, because it gives you the confidence now to approach someone, and you've got something to to prove to them, like, hey, it's not, and it can't just be that, because if you have all that stuff, but you're not, active on social, or you're not, well spoken like you are, or whatever, you can come on podcasts and do stuff like this. It just doesn't lead anywhere. You need, it's just another little feather in the cap that pushes you over the edge to hopefully make something happen.
So between the two of you, maybe you could shed some light on this. Like, how important is having a social media presence? Like, is that going to make a big deal for some people out there, or is that something that you can work around as long as you have the right resume and presentation of what you're doing? Like, does either of you have an opinion on that?
I think the social media is probably more important than if you are any decent. I mean, you have to be reasonably decent, but I think the social media part is the weighs way more heavy than the actual tournament victories.
Yeah, for sure. You need it, because I mean, that's the first thing they're going to look at when you send them a media kit or an email with some statistics or whatever. Everyone's different. Some people want you to design some nice, whatever PowerPoint sort of thing or whatever, but it's just the social media is the first thing they're going to look at. And if you haven't posted in a month, they're going to say, well, this guy really isn't. Now, having said that, I feel like I'm okay on social media, but I don't post like a ton either. And if you look at a lot of the Bassmaster guys, a lot of them don't post as much as you think they do. They don't. I looked at somebody the other day and posted in like a couple months.
Do you think that's made up for by the fact that they're just on TV? Like,
yes,
they have exposure via what they
right.
do, because what they do is filmed versus and shown on live TV without their own presence having to push that media forward. Whereas like some of us that's at the bottom of the barrel, let's say as an example, like in kayak fishing, we don't have, a live program on Fox Sports or ESPN or what have you. So like we just don't get natural exposure with what we're doing. We have to create it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yep. Because they can send the media kit of the numbers that Bassmaster live streams reaches, or the MLF live stream, and we don't have that. So our numbers is just our social. That's about it. I mean, other than I send them, I'm on these podcasts, which certainly is a big deal, right? Whenever I'm a guest on a podcast, I keep track of all this stuff, and I'm actually getting it all in an Excel spreadsheet. Keep track of every article I've written for Bassmaster or wherever. I've written articles, with Kayak Angler, and just been anywhere you appear. If you keep track of all that, that still matters too. It's not just social, but it's social. Like Steve Fields is saying in the comments, it's definitely huge. I mean, this is what they look at. It's probably, sad, but it's true, because a lot of the other stuff, if you're speaking at seminars, at expos, for example, like the Columbus Fishing Expo we were at last weekend or the weekend before, unless we did post you did a live video of me up there actually doing the seminar in the water, but that turns into social. So it's like, if I did it without the social, it's almost like the world would have never known, like never happened. Yep. Never happened to the marketing directors, anybody. So anyway, we'll move on from that, but it's good to see, that there's been some movement on that front, because I feel like it sets a precedent for the next person that wins AOI or 2 events in a year, or maybe it's not both Hobie, it could be a Bass and a KBF, and they don't win AOI, but it kind of sets a standard and gets more credibility out there for the kayak anglers, because every door that you open, I know you may not feel like you're opening doors, but you are, and every door that I open or especially someone like Christine Fisher, who's opened up a lot of doors with her following. Chad Hoover or whoever. I mean, the KBN guys. Anybody that opens doors, all it does is allow, those doors to be open for other kayak anglers. So it's still, it's good stuff, man. So keep up the good work, and we'll move on with some river bassin talk here.
River bassin talk. I'll crack it open.
Yeah, buddy.
Finesse or power or mix?
Power.
River. Power.
No questions asked. Power.
Good man. Good man.
This should almost be like the newlywed game. This should be the newlywed game. You should ask the question, and I will answer it over, like write it down, and then he answers it, and I'll hold it up and see if I got it right.
And see if you got it right.
I can't fish fast enough on the river. Yeah. I don't think they're like a lot of the guys like Thomason and some of the other local guys that we fish with and float the rivers with. I mean, they give me a hard time. They're like, if you float down the river with anyone else you can name, you're going to make more casts per mile than they will. And I'm like, yeah, you're moving every tree could have a fish behind it around here, And there's sometimes that's the way to go, is to just make as many stinking casts as possible.
I like it, dude. That's me, man. Like, the CPM, the cast per mile. That's the new term. It's the CPM.
Cast per mile.
Yeah. So this actually kind of reminds me of something that Omar and I talked about on the lesson I gave him, the virtual lesson the other day. I explained to him, I said, look, a lot of people will fish their baits all the way back to the boat, or they will, not parallel the structure or the bank like they should. And I'm like, I've noticed over the history of all my fishing in rivers that they bite, right on the structure that they're ambushing from, right? So
throw it in there, crank 3 times, and then burn it back on the top of the water to make another cast. Yeah.
But people will argue, they're like, "Whoa, I caught a 5-pounder one time right at the boat and all this," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that happened like one time." So using that one example, or it could happen several times, especially in murky water. I definitely bring it back a little, like all the way a little bit, almost all the way, a little further. Yeah. But you kind of are target fishing when you're river fishing. So you generally can almost call your shot. Where they're going to ambush from.
Especially when it's clear, like the clear and the water's kind of low, like lower than normal, regardless where it's at. Clear and low, I mean, you're on a target 100%.
Right, and it's like they're mugging somebody in the dark alley, right? They're hiding behind that dumpster, and then they're jumping them, right? So anyway, pay up your.
I feel like Daredevil, a blind guy, just searching for him, just throwing out cats.
Yeah, the mob is there jumping them. You should have paid your gambling bets, sucker. Like it. Anyway, they hide behind the dumpster. Pay your bookie, everybody. Pay your bookie. They hide behind and they ambush. So this is like a stump or a rock or whatever it is, they ambush from. So I just feel like, you can give me that one example. You caught a fish right at the boat, but for every time that didn't happen, you wound it from halfway from you to where your cast landed back to the boat. I was already moving on, hitting, whatever, like made 200 more casts that day or 500 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
In the more like the
more targets you were hitting.
The more area, more targets, and the more part of the strike. I mean, of the cast, the first 50% basically of the cast that they usually hit. It's usually on that because you're throwing right at the target, then boom, they hit. So anyway, and then how many more fish have I caught? This is like giving up a lot of good stuff here. So I guess that's the point of this podcast. But anyway, it sounds like you agree, and that's the way you do it too. So
that's like giving up Big Fish Bruno Mars radio. I don't know if y'all saw that post on KBN, but it was talking about do y'all listen to music while you're fishing, and me and Eric have this. I mean, it's incredible how many times like him especially will put on Bruno Mars, and it's like we're floating down the river, having a just a fun float, and he'll put on Bruno Mars, and like he's blaring it to the point where I can hear it across the river, and one of us will catch a donkey. I mean, it's like crazy. Yeah. Big Fish Bruno Mars radio.
That's funny.
I've actually caught myself you get so into the routine, and then I start to get like bored. Like not bored because I don't like the fishing aspect, but just like you're just doing a routine and you're having a tough time and you're not catching fish and like you start to like to spin out a little bit.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I find what I like when I start to do that, I start singing to myself, or you know what I mean? Like I start singing songs in my head of songs that I like because I don't like get out my phone and start playing the radio. But as soon as I start singing myself, I usually get a bite within the first couple. Like I try not to like rely on it, like it's a thing that will happen every time. But I do notice like when I start to distract and get into a groove and then start just like listening to music in my own head or like singing or whatever, like to myself when I'm hopefully nobody's around hearing me because it probably sounds awful. But that's when I think it just puts my body into a rhythm, and then I'm actually casting better and presenting better and actually starting to get bit. But there is I have noticed a pattern with that. I don't know if correlation is causation, but it's there for sure.
I play a lot of Turnpike Troubadours, Cody Jinks, a lot of the good stuff when I'm floating down the river.
Yeah. Nice.
Drew's just talking.
Very
to
nice.
himself.
Well, what?
When he's floating down the river, he's just always
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess
or
so.
Could be
I don't
talking
even
to
know.
fish. I don't know, but
quite frankly, I don't even. I don't even know what I do, man. I just you guys tell me. You're telling me I talk, then I guess I talk. But I'm just just going. But anyway, let's talk about the bait you like to use for this power fishing. Some of your favorite go-tos, man. What's
I'm first and foremost, I'm a jackhammer guy. I think I probably throw a white and chartreuse one 75% of the time, and then I probably split a green pumpkin with the nickel blade, and probably the golden shiner with the gold blade, something gold. Probably the other time. That's really the only three I keep. Like I said, I like to keep it really simple, so that's about the only three colors I keep. Throw a lot of spinner baits, just white and chartreuse, some bluegill colored spinner baits. The Z-Man sling blades are getting to be probably some of my absolute favorite ones. The more I get to use them, I really like throwing topwater. Oh snap! Drew's got one ready.
I got one on the shelf back there that I broke. I don't know why. I must have had an emotional attachment to it, but it's back there.
Little secret on that too, by the way. I bend them down. So Jordan, I don't know if you see that. I don't keep them, like this.
Little compact action.
I bend it down.
In case they go for the blade, they get the whole thing.
Yeah. It's real tight and compact here, and bend it.
That's a river trip.
Bend this forward, and then it is. Anyway, but
talk about juice. Put that away.
I know that's stuff that's saved usually for the virtual seminars. I don't know. I'm in a very giving mood tonight, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
minute marker 47. Jeez.
Whopper plopper. Every river fish likes a whopper plopper of some sort.
Yeah, no doubt. We definitely fish a very similar style, which is kind of funny because, we both won the AOY since Hobie has started AOY. And I was, right there before, our little girl came early on me and didn't get a chance to really defend that title, whatever. But hopefully we'll be back this year. Hopefully you and I will be back in contention. But it's just funny because it's not. If you look at the whole list of the top AOY guys, it's more guys that probably do fish more lakes and or guys that have the skill set that do a little bit of both. And you and I try to kind of stick to the moving water where we can. But in other words, the way the AOY works too with, you only can count your best 3 events and you can fish 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But the thing that's crazy is that one that you can't get rid of at the TOC or the KBF National Championship. It's a little, it's not, I'm not saying it's our the way in other words, I don't think too much should be taken away from the fact that 2 guys that typically just fish like moving water or paddle power only or whatever. I don't think that really says a whole lot, but based on the way that format is about that, this is the way you should do it. Which is kind of lead me into our topic about lakes and rivers, because Bailey will be coming on here soon, but I don't think this isn't like a big enough sample set to say, well, there's a clear advantage to this other than the lakes, because we're going to talk about the pros and cons with Bailey on the lakes versus rivers, and especially in tournaments, like where the advantages and disadvantages are. So let's kind of lead into that, and we'll like, so what are some of the reasons or that, you like trying to find moving water?
I think a lot of our events, especially now that they're selling out and you get 200 people at a tournament, 50 of those guys are going to be there for a week minimum beforehand. And I think as kayak anglers, there's a lot of guys that don't really know how to pre-fish, what I would consider correctly or well. And, they basically just go and catch a bunch of fish. And I've heard guys bragging before tournaments that say, man, I caught 40 fish out of my school out there on Kentucky Lake before the tournament. And I listen to that and I go, dude, if I catch 40 fish in the next 2 days, I'm pumped. Because that's, you go places that a lot of guys don't go, and you catch 40 fish, I'm going to cash a check with 40 fish. I mean, I think if I catch 40 fish at every tournament that I go to in 2 days, I'm perfectly happy whether I won money or not. Like, that's, my odds are really good. So, to me, a lot of times I don't get a whole lot of time to pre-fish. So me looking at places where I don't think other people have went, and I'm going to try to do that same thing. I leave tomorrow as soon as I get off work and drive to Eufaula for the Georgia Bass Nation event down there. And, I mean, same thing. I'm going to go hit some stuff at Eufaula Saturday that I really wanted to fish at the TOC this past year, but I just couldn't quite get to. And I didn't see anybody else there. So, I mean, same concept. It's a different time of year. I'm going to look at it a little bit differently. But, I mean, water temps in the mid-60s, I heard, little muddy water. I'm going to go throw a jackhammer and cover water and see if I can find some fish trying to get up in some shallow water to set up to get ready for, to do their yearly ritual and just try to get away from people that I know that have been down there since, Wednesday, that are down there trying to catch fish. And
that's a good point. I think a lot of people, when it comes to the lakes versus the rivers, because obviously we know how to fish lakes too, but a lot of these lake guys, one of the advantages they do have is they could go crack on 40 fish, and because they're in schools sometimes of hundreds of fish, and so it's not gonna. I mean, I still wouldn't be catching that many if I was them, because if you're catching that many, surely you see them on your graphs if you're out there offshore or whatever. Don't catch any more. You don't need to. You want to save all those because, 3 people could show up there, 10 people could show up there.
They start moving. They start breaking up. Chasing little pods of fish. I've done it. I just don't like it.
Yeah, I know, right? So I agree with that. It's like, they could do that, but if we did that, and we're in a smaller river or tributary or a backwater, a little oxbow or, whatever, a creek, that's all of our fish we're going to catch the whole tournament. Like, that's it. Yep. And you're done. Like, if you can't catch that many, you need to, that's why I try to say you need to sample a little bit. I mean, if you can do it now, look, when you guys listen to this podcast or watch it live, when we're talking about it, we sure make this thing sound so easy. Oh, just go into the creek and catch a few fish and then get out.
It's so easy.
Yeah, it's so easy. And you're just like, oh yeah, just power fish your way down as many casts you can, and by the end of the day, you're gonna win AOI. But it's just not that easy. But because now you got to figure out which creeks to go to and why, and you got to worry about weather conditions changing and rain and flooding your spots.
Which creeks get muddy the least amount, or which creeks clear up this time of year? Which creeks clear up the fastest? Yeah,
exactly. So there's a lot of advantages to having those giant schools on the lakes if you are capable of putting your head down on the screen and graphing and finding them. And that's why you see, if you've been watching, Jacob Wheeler with the live scope on Lake Fork here this week on Major League Fishing, or if you see Buddy Gross just won the Bassmaster Elite Series fishing offshore grass on Lake Harris. I mean, those schools, because you said you're trying to get somewhere that, gets you away from other people. And you mean kayak anglers, but you also mean bass boats.
Yeah.
That's why I got a kayak, is to get into that stuff. But here's what's crazy. Even with all that pressure on the bass boats and the kayak anglers on the main lake, the truth of the matter is it's still the bigger the ocean, the bigger the fish, the more fish. It still has more fish, and they are concentrated into certain areas on that lake. They like certain spots, like the grass that Buddy Gross won on the Harris chain, or, whatever. So the logs on Fork, you name it, they're still concentrated on
all the miles of
things.
ledges on Kentucky Lake. Yeah.
Yeah, they're concentrated. So if that's your style and you can do that, which is why we're going to have this sort of, it's not really a debate. It's just, we're just laying out for people who are into our style of fishing in tournaments, you got to weigh out the pros and the cons of should you fish that way on this event or not, because there are a lot of pros to the lake side of things with the bigger schools, and as much pressure as it gets with bass boats, and it does, there's still so much out there that no one is finding, and there's the winning fish are certainly in the lakes, and it could also be in the rivers and creeks. But I want to kind of team up with you guys here, and you can keep track if you want, Ken, or help me out. But I almost want to list out the pros and cons, and let's like in a nice little concise thing. So one is what you just said, a pro for, well, actually, let's do, a pro for the riverside would be you could get away from other people. Okay, that's one pro. So we'll kind of keep a list going here. Maybe we can, if you want, you can even share your screen if you want. Ken, you can pull up a notepad or something on your computer. I don't know if you can, and later we can pop it up on the screen somehow. Maybe there's a way to do it in our system here with StreamYard. But anyway, all right. So yes, that's a pro. You can get away from other people. And then we're going to read all this off to Bailey when he gets on here in a minute. The con to that, well, let's do a con right after that. Would you not agree, Jordan, that yes, you can get away from other bass boats and kayak anglers? The con to that is, again, this is making this decision, guys. If you're fishing a tournament, you're considering fishing the River Bassin way. Here's your negative to that. If other people,
time and effort to get there.
If other people, and your time and effort could be, but if other people show up and you are in a small body of water, unlike the lake guys who you might have a school of hundreds of fish, that's not the same with our smaller areas. And no one's going to win that tournament now. It's like, no, you're splitting up all. There might be a good fish that could actually matter every mile or two in some situation, because one of the other cons for, you can write this one down if you want to, Ken. One of the other cons for fishing the River Bassin style is a lot of the creeks, many of the creeks will not have fish that will ever get as big. They won't compete to win the tournament. You might catch a lot of them, good numbers, but they're not the winning, you know what I mean? Like, never going to win the tournament, but you might, cash a check barely, or you might, just have a good finish in the 40th out of 100 or whatever. But that overall upside, that ceiling was never there to win the tournament in those bodies of water. A lot of creeks and rivers are like that off the main lakes, because a lot of your bigger fords and stuff, sometimes it just, the bigger largemouth that are lazy are in the lakes. But there are certainly rivers and creeks and certain times of the year that rivers and creeks definitely have the fish. So like you just said, I'm going to hit on your con. I'm doing a lot of the cons here because it's kind of easy for me to and I'm going to get to the pros, but another one you just said was, it's hard. Sometimes it takes time and effort to get to those places, and potentially a little dangerous. I've hurt myself many times, and it's dragged my kayak a long ways, and it's tough, dude. I know you could tell the story about you drug your kayak to win, or you placed. I can't remember. That was Pickwick, maybe.
Yeah, Pickwick. I think I finished 5th, 6th, maybe something like that. Not a top tier finish, but a good check. And I was dragging my kayak probably a quarter mile through some flooded public land area.
Yeah.
And there were, I could see a lot of signs of hogs through there, and there were some really large snakes that were over there. And I was pistol in one hand and kayak in the other, dragging it through the woods, and it was absolutely miserable. And the mosquitoes were as thick as I've ever seen them anywhere that I've ever been. And it was absolutely, spray, mosquito spray, walk a little further until I got tired and couldn't pull the kayak any further. And then I'd stop and look around and wonder when the next hog was going to come by that I was going to see. And it was just, stuff like that, man. That's, you have to either be not right in the head to be there, period, or be there looking to shoot something. And I was just there trying to catch some fish. And the drive that a lot of these guys have that travel and fish, you have to put that much into it to compete with them, and then some to beat them.
Yep.
So when you go to places that fisheries are being tough like Pickwick was, you have to do things like that in order to stay competitive. And at the time, I didn't realize how important that tournament was. At the time, it was just like, oh man, I've got a free weekend. I've always wanted to go fish Pickwick. Let's go fish Pickwick. And I mean, I didn't go down there with, oh, I need to cull my 10th or 11th place at Seminole with a 6th place at Pickwick so I can win Angler of the Year. That really wasn't in my thought process. It was, I just want to go fish Pickwick. Like anything else, I just want to go fish a tournament because that's how I'm wired. I just want to go fish, and if it's a tournament, that's even better.
You just said something that was key, man. To actually compete with these guys on the lakes, you know what I'm saying, with the live scope and how good that's getting, and how good anglers are getting with it. You almost have to be willing to do some stuff like that to even get to some water that may actually. Maybe if you catch them all and you do play your cards just right, and nobody else shows up, and the weather doesn't mess you up and blow the area out or whatever. Only then does it finally all come together, and you almost have to do some stuff like this sometimes because it's hard to compete with those guys, man, on the lakes when they're dialed in. It's tough. So that's a good point. The thing I want to mention about, again, another con, and we'll get to all the pros and the good stuff. Trust me. Another con to that is, think about it. Jordan had to go pre-fish and do that pre-fishing to check that area out, or you had to come in from another way, but I assume the other way would have been a long paddle or
I actually was walking around trying to figure out how to get in this particular creek, and I couldn't figure it out, and I was on the what's the Far Wide app that Hobie they sponsored the Angler of the Year, and it shows what land is public and what land is private. And there was this little area where it was public up next to it. And I basically just went down through there and was just walking around. And I had no idea. I mean, I'm out there walking around in just like some water shoes. And I'm like, man, this is so wet and sloppy and nasty. And I didn't take my kayak with me. And I went down there and looked around. And I get down through there, and there's hogs running around and giant snakes in the water. And I basically got down through there, saw that there was a place where I could possibly put my kayak in between two trees, and basically where the water was just running off this little hill. And I went and drove to Academy Sports, bought a pair of snake boots, and went back there, put the snake boots on, and then drug my kayak, few hundred yards, quarter mile, eighth mile, whatever it was, and drug it through that, because that's how worried I was about the snakes, but also how much I wanted to get in there and fish that.
Yeah, exactly. So you did fish it pre-fishing, and you accessed it that way pre-fishing.
I
fished
it for maybe an hour, and I was throwing a fluke. I like to throw a fluke because I feel like I can get a lot of bites and work it fast and see how big a fish is by swirl and how aggressive they are without actually putting a hook in them. And probably the first little area that I fished, I wasn't no more than probably 20 or 30 feet. I get in the water, I make like 2 casts, and I had a pretty good fish come up and swirl on it. And I was kind of looking, I'm like, well, that was fast. And I kind of got caught off guard. And while I was kind of looking, to see, and I'm standing up, looking around, trying to see, because the water was kind of clear. And I had another one just take off with it and like hooked itself. And I'm like, okay, this is a 16.5-inch fish. There's at least some reasonable size back here. Right. And I had no idea the potential that place really had. And I had no idea how good that place was until day 2, really, because day 1 I caught my fish early and kind of left it alone. You don't want to burn a spot out, when it's tough and you're in some skinny water. And day 2 I went after it, and I probably caught 30 fish on day 2, and it was absolutely insane. I would have loved to have spent a lot more time working that area a lot harder on day 1.
Yeah, I do a lot of the same. I really don't burn it up like you said. So that was smart. You only got in there for an hour. So my point is, telling people and reminding people how hard it was for you to get in there. You're exhausted. I mean, you're younger guys still, I would say, but you still were exhausted. I'm sure it's not easy. Like no one wants to go, hey honey, I'm going down to fish this tournament and it's going to be a lot of fun. You don't imagine yourself physically wearing yourself out and being exhausted and just beat up, and especially in pre-fishing. So a lot of people, they don't do that, and here's the con. Here's the reason why it's challenging to do this. You could have gone in there, and I've done it so many times, where I've paddled so far to get to a spot, or I've drugged through whatever to get to some place, and then it stinks. In Florida one time, there was a swamp. A lot of Florida has a lot of swampy stuff that's connected. You can get to the main lake, so you're in legal water, and boats can't get into that stuff. And I went, and I mean, I'm getting out of my kayak, and I'm knee chest deep in all the way chest deep in muck, just dragging it through to get to this old. It looked like it was an old quarry or something that was dredged out, and because it just made this separate little pond back in all this cane and all this nasty swamp area. And I know hogs and gators are everywhere, and it's so creepy because I'm in the water, like up to my knees, and I can't see anything. It's just vegetation all underneath me, and I just want to get to this big opening I see in the satellite image. I get in there, and like an old timer told me, he goes, "Oh yeah," he's like, yeah. And he saw me, he was like, "Well, we caught big ones back in there, big catfish and stuff." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So, and big bass back in the day. I was like, "All right, cool, thanks, man, see ya." And then I go check it out, and nothing. Like I don't know why. Like it never gets touched by man, nothing. And that happens so often now. That killed, like, usually if you go to a place that takes a long time to get to that other people aren't going to, it's going to kill half a day, if not 3/4, or even all of your day pre-fishing. And a lot of people only have 1 day or 2 days, 2.5, 3 to pre-fish.
It's going to kill half a day, and you're going to be so tired, you're just going to go drive around and look for places to try to slide your kayak off in the water the rest of the day, because you're like, man, I can't afford to go do that again today, Yep.
And you got nothing to show for it. It's a big goose egg. So that is because it sounds glorious, like your story sounds great, and I've done well in places like that. But I got to remind people the con is certainly, it can be a big bust. And if you try to do something like I did in
last year at Hartwell, when we went there, I went and tried to do some crazy stuff and caught a couple fish, and was way out in the middle of nowhere, and there was no one around. There was nobody. I kept checking it and pre-fishing, and I was like, man, it was one of those spots that even when I pre-fished there and didn't catch any fish, I was like, man, if I spent some more time there, that I might figure that one out, And I kept going back up there and looking around here, a few hours here, a few hours there, trying it in the morning, trying it in the afternoon, and even decided to go there on the second day of the tournament, and just nothing. And I committed so much time to looking around that whole area, not even just that spot, but that whole area, and it never did pan out. Nothing.
I ran, I think it was Kissimmee in 2021. I ran up a creek as far as I could go, and just kept going and going and going and going and going and going. I spent the whole day up there, and didn't even make it back to my original launch. I had to have somebody come pick me up at a bridge because I was just too far away from the launch point, and just nothing was panning out. Just I went all in, and it didn't work out. But it just got a big bite, didn't get the fish in, the numbers weren't there, so it still has potential, but it just wasn't there that day, and it just nothing panned out. So it's definitely. That goose egg is always looming in the back of your head when you're trying something like that.
Right. No doubt, man. It's challenging. So you just want to kind of remind people that it's not always a honey hole. That's one thing I have written there. The other issue and the challenge with this style, if you're going all in on river bassin, is this time of year, like the winter, it's really hard. Lake fish are grouped up in the warmer water. The main lakes stay a little bit warmer, and a lot of times your bait fish in the main lakes are very active, and moving water can be a little cooler sometimes this time of the year, coming in from cold rains and snow melt, stuff like that. So the time of the year, it's a challenge. You were even in Texas fishing, and recently now Lake Fork doesn't. Here's the other problem: you can't find true moving water sometimes. Like Lake Fork doesn't really have any creeks that are really even big enough to even go up in. Once you actually get into true creeks way up there, I mean,
the whole creek that they dam the lake up. I mean, it's not much more than I mean, it's smaller than the creek right over here. I mean, it's nothing. And you look at a lot of those Texas lakes below the dams, there's, half a mile of river, and then it just disappears into swamp and nothingness. And it's like, what in the world? It's like,
Yep.
you grow up fishing the TVA system, and below every dam is another lake that's just as good as the lake above it. And if you go down through there, I mean, arguably the lakes get better the further you follow the river down. So, I remember the first time I saw Fork, and I looked down through there, and there's just a small trickle below the dam, and it basically just disappears and dries up before it actually starts doing anything. That absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah, it's crazy. Texas is just a whole unique situation. All the lakes over there and the rivers. All right, so tell me if you guys think I got this list good, because Bailey will be on here soon. And I'm sorry, Omar, you made a comment earlier, giving up all the juice. We are giving up some good juice here, but trust me, Omar and I, we have a lot more juice that we shared on that virtual lesson that I'm not going to give up. But anyway, so
my list, I have 1 pro and 4 cons. That's where I'm at. Okay.
All right, so I have pre-fishing will suffer if it's a bust. What does that mean? What did I even say?
Goose egg.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The pre-fishing is going to suffer. Yeah. If you goose egg, and you spend a lot of time, because it's not always a honey hole. So,
I think
one
of the
smaller,
things, the fish are a lot dumber. I mean, you get a lot more fish that are a lot more aggressive. You don't have to worry about your particulars on your baits nearly as much, in my opinion, versus you hear lake guys all the time and super finesse guys like, I changed from a 1/4 ounce drop shot weight to a 3/8 ounce drop shot weight, and man, the only jackhammers I own are 1/2 ounce, period, end of story. That's it. I do not change. I either slow it down if I want to fish slow, or I speed it up if I want to fish it faster. That's it.
Yep. Well, that's a pro. You're on the pros for sure. That's definitely a good pro. We'll put it on our list, as the fish are a little bit more uneducated. My list of cons was pre-fishing will suffer if it's a bust. I just want to get through these real quick to make sure we got them, Ken. Pre-fishing will suffer, which just kind of falls in the line of another one I've got listed here. It's not always a honey hole. Just because you go to some remote place doesn't mean it's always going to work out. The fish a lot of times are smaller. Like, let's say you got a bunch of creeks feeding a lake. You might have 2 creeks or medium-sized river, whatever you want to call it. You might have 1 or 2 that could, if they're not blown out and if the other people don't show up, have the potential to win that tournament. But that's not different than a lake guy. A lake guy, there are only a certain number of schools of fish and areas and places and patterns that could win the tournament too. So it's actually still very similar. It's freaking hard to catch, winning size bags, lake or river. But either way, you got to figure out which one of those creeks and rivers and stretches of that creek or river is going to be the one you gotta fish. So anyway, the other one I have is that if you're pre-fishing, 2-3 days, 1-2-3 days, everything could change in a river or creek in an instant with rain, like it did on Pickwick last year, KBF Pickwick for us, and a few other events. The Possum Kingdom Bass Championship last year, same thing. Everything we learned on pre-fishing didn't matter anymore. And I only say that to say, on a lake, that's not true. Okay, it can certainly change a little bit. Maybe your water level goes up. If you're catching them in 12.5 foot off of a point or 20 feet, it might be 22 feet now because the lake rose 2 feet. But it's not going to be unfishable all of a sudden. Like, your spot's still there. It's still down there deep, unless it's, in the upper end of the lake and it just got totally red. But you get what I'm saying. The lake's still the lake. It's still there. It's not ever going to be unsafe or unfishable. So red and blown out. So other people was the other con. You show up and there's other people there, and there's only so many fish to win a tournament in these places, especially now, Jordan. I know you've thought about this. When 200 people are signing up for these events, it only is going to make it harder to get to a place and find a spot where you're not going to see somebody, Yeah.
It's I went to places like at Dardanelle that first year. We went to Dardanelle. I went up a creek and you were already in it. I was like, well, I know this creek's good. I just, didn't get, it was a plan B on the second day of the tournament. And I was like, all right, I got to go find some fish to fill out my limit. I went to try to go up this creek, and I saw your truck perched up here on the corner underneath this bridge, and I was like,
should I keep going or not? Am I gonna be?
It's like, oh man, like, is
I,
there seconds in there? Is it deep up? You know, when you see an accomplished river angler already run through a stretch, you don't know what to do. You're like,
did you enjoy those sloppy seconds, or was it sloppy nothings?
I had one missed fish that I would have loved to have caught, but it was slow going. There's a lot of people I wouldn't probably care to fish behind, but I probably would not prefer fishing behind Drew in a small river.
I don't want to fish behind you or Lance Cooley or Tim Perkins. I mean, there's a lot of good river anglers out there that I would not want to fish behind either. So anyway, but time of the year we mentioned, and I think that was the main cons. Now the pros, back to kind of what Jordan was just saying, they're uneducated fish. A lot of times they're a little bit easier to catch, but again, that's not much different than the fish that Bailey, who's going to pop on here any second. And Brian Thrift is a good example. Brian Thrift always says, like, I don't pre-fish the bank, period. There's no point. He's like, I know how to catch fish on the dang bank. I can go down and parallel bank with a, square bill or whatever it is, or a spinnerbait, or throw a jig around under docks and stuff, skip it. So he doesn't pre-fish it because he's like me in the sense that, and I think you're the same way. Like, I'm looking for a spot that's going to win the tournament. I don't care. I'll wing it. With what I did at Pickwick when it flooded, Ken, and you and I tied, and you won by tiebreaker. That spot, you remember, I was spinning out the night before. I didn't know where to go. I went to a total new spot that I had to just take an educated guess. They got to be here if it floods. They have to pull there. And I went there, and they were there. So I'll just hunt and pre-fish for the winning fish continually until I exhaust it. And if I don't find them, day one of the tournament is me hunting again for them, because I'm going to figure I'm going to run into them eventually, But and if you don't, then it's whatever. But I'm not going to go back to those spots that I know weren't going to win. I'm there to win, right? That's kind of why I fish the tournament. So anyway, that's it's no different. Bailey and the guys that Adam Reiser, guys really good with electronics offshore. Cody Milton. Cody's kind of, he's unique and he can do everything. Main Lake. Russ Snyder's the same way. He'll fish skinny. He'll fish main lake stuff, whatever. They're really good. Where I try to stick to, my thing. But those fish that they're looking for, everyone's still looking for fish that are unpressured in a school or uneducated. It just happens to be that sometimes they are pressured on the lakes or it's clear water. And you hear people lake fishing always talk about this, especially the live scope guys now or whatever. They're like, man, there's a school of them there. I see them all there, and I'm having a hard time getting them to trigger. I got to knock it off a stump, or I got to trigger the fire up the school. Well, Jordan, the pro to river bassin is you don't have to ever fire up any school or trigger them and hit it off a stump or knock it. It doesn't hurt to knock it off of a stump or a rock. It's not.
Yeah, they're opportunistic, sure.
Yeah, they're just eating. If they're there, they're pretty much gonna eat. So we don't have to I think be as stealthy or worry so much about my line size is this and this. I got to do this drop shot, this and blah, blah, blah. It's like, we're just pretty much sticking to keeping it simple and whatnot. But anyway, that's another pro is unpressured fish, which you mentioned. If people don't show up, let's kind of counter the ones, we said, if other people show up, you're kind of hosed. What if other people don't show up? Then you got unpressured fish, you got yourself, and it's gravy. So if it doesn't rain or the weather doesn't change so much where it, blows out or messes up your water for some reason, then, you could potentially be golden too. Once the time of the year, because time of the year was a con, like this time of the year is tough to win in the rivers. Once the time of the year opens up and now we start getting into March, then again, it can be good fishing in the rivers and creeks, obviously. The one con was not always a honey hole. A lot of times they can be honey holes and they can be awesome. So those are kind of the opposites. And the pre-fishing, it will suffer if it's a bust was the con. Like if you spend all that time and effort to get to a remote place, then a lot of times it will be a bust, but there are the times that it's not. So if you have the time in pre-fishing and you have the, physical energy to kind of get and do what you have to do to get in there. Hey, a lot of times I wouldn't say a lot of times, but occasionally it's not a bust. It actually is a great spot. that you found.
It's definitely more occasionally than a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It's definitely on the occasional side.
It is.
So are you just going to call that one the golden goose instead of the goose egg?
There we go. Golden goose.
Yeah.
Well, Bailey just texted me. He's going to be on in 2 minutes, so that's perfect timing because we've got our list of and then we'll get Bailey's opinion on this stuff. But for me, I see lakes as the fish can generally be bigger in lakes. Certain situations that could definitely be bigger in lakes, at least heavier for sure. We know that because they're a little bit lazier fish, than the river fish, which are a little bit more athletic. And they have to. That's kind of a pro, in my opinion, to the rivers. They're a little bit more. They live on a treadmill, so I feel like they have a higher metabolism and they have to actually eat a little bit more. And that explains why they're so aggressive and opportunistic, is because they're burning more calories, and therefore they may not be as heavy. But we don't care about weight in kayak tournaments. We care about length. So I don't care that they're thin and in shape. You name an athlete. It's a LeBron James. It's like a strong, healthy, in shape. It's not a fat, lazy. I don't know. There's who to use an example. It's not like Santa Claus. Santa Claus. Yeah, John Daly. That's better. That's better than my Santa Claus. It's hard to find an athlete that's out of shape. That was a great
Babe Ruth.
Yeah. But Babe Ruth is a good one. That's a
big power hitter.
That's a good one.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not great on that history, but that's what came to mind.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a good one. So I think that we'll mention some of these to Bailey and see what he thinks. But anything else you guys can think of that's pro for the lakes? It's easier, on yourself, right? Spot lock. You can sit there and spot lock in one spot all day and win a tournament where we're busting our tails.
Usually use a boat ramp if you're fishing for whitefish.
Yep, boat ramps are easy to put in. Bigger fish. I'm writing all these down. Bigger schools of fish. And we just lost him. It looks like we lost Jordan. That's all right. Let's see. Let's bring in a comment while we're waiting. Let's see. Travis Dawkins, I like what you said here. You call it embracing the suck, which I may have already posted that one up here. But he calls that, struggle to get to these places, embracing the suck. And you kind of have to. And then he says, I paddled 3 miles up a creek in my whitewater boat in a flood on Pickwick last year, caught an 18.75 in a storm drain, but only ended up with 3 fish. Definitely cons to the river bassin. So the gamble, again, it paid off, but didn't pay off, if you will.
Yeah.
So that's cool, though. I mean, that to me is inspirational. That's what, James Durbecker, the owner of Crescent Kayaks, and I was dragging my kayak through the swamp in Kissimmee where my creek got choked by hyacinth, and I went through too many patches of it to ever go back upstream and turn around, and I had to drag out. I was like 4 miles downstream, had to drag out through the woods of the swamp. James said to me, he's like, that's like what this brand is all about. It's what this company's all about. It's like, this is about inspiring people, and doing like cool stuff and like that. So it was very inspirational. He thought so. And I feel like our sport, river bassin style is a little bit of that. But let's bring Bailey in. We just lost Jordan. He'll come back in a second, I'm sure, once he may have lost power or something to his phone or whatever he was using. Let's add Bailey in here. We can continue this. What's up, Bailey?
What's going on, man? Sorry, I'm a little late. We were doing our Bassmaster Classic Fantasy Fishing show, and like everything with our show, we talk way too much. I'm sitting there, I look at the time, I'm like, oh, dang, Drew's going to be pissed.
You're good. No. Have I ever been pissed? I mean, God.
No. I don't think I've ever seen you mad, dude.
I mean, there are times on the water when, like just for a brief second when you lose that big fish or something that, I don't know if you guys, did you watch Scott Martin lose those fish on day one of the Elite Series on Harris Chain?
That hurt me. It hurt me. It was painful.
It was very painful to watch because I've been there before. And when he yelled the F word, it started to yell it, and he kind of like, and he knew he was on live camera, and he just couldn't control himself. He was so, after you've lost so many fish and you lose like an 8-pounder that you touched, it was in your hands. I get it. But anyway, I can get upset at times. But I get over it pretty quick once I'm off the water and it's all done. But anyway, you guys should go listen to Bailey's podcast, The Serious Angler, because it is one of the only podcasts out there that talks bass boat and kayak. It does a little bit of both. I think it's, it's probably a little bit more bass boat, but a lot of the techniques, honestly, the stuff you're talking about applies to the kayak. But you do touch on kayak stuff and have kayak guests, and that's pretty cool for sure. And you guys have a great fantasy show. I'm going to go back and listen to that because I'm in your group. I'm trying to catch you. You did good. It looked like again. So you probably are in the lead with your fantasy picks, but I don't know. I have to go back and listen to the show and see if you're still in the lead or not. But
yeah, it's going good compared to last year. Last year I had like some weird, I was like stubborn. Like I'm going to pick everything 3% and lower just to be like sneaky. And it worked horribly. So I just used common sense this year, and I'm tied with Deacon for our small little group. But
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Nice, man. Nice. Yeah. It's a fun listen. If you guys are traveling to the KBF or the Santee Cooper or this, Bassmaster, go give it a listen. Let's see. So Bailey, Jordan was just on and we lost him, but we actually got in our entire segment with him. Hopefully he'll pop back on in a minute. I think he may have just lost power or something, but we just went over a pros and cons list of, our style that we kind of talk about on this show, which is kind of odd because you're a lake guy and here you are on the River Bassin podcast. You're more lake, offshore, electronics oriented, and we're kind of the opposite. So, which is why we always joke that we make really good, housemates for tournaments or just good. We have a good friendship because I could tell you exactly where I'm fishing and you could tell me where you're fishing and I could just care less and you could care less. And it's like, great.
I can tell you my exact waypoints and just know you'll never be there.
Never be there. I'm not gonna deal with it. Now, there's a lot of pros to what you do out in the lake, what you guys do. And if you guys are fans of, and hopefully if you're listening to the show, you're also fans of just watching the live streams for Major League Fishing and Bassmaster Elite Series, any live streams you can get, you're learning from the pros, right? And one thing I've learned is there's a lot of offshore fishing obviously being shown. And man, it's incredible what is out there. If you find it, it's unreal what Maine lakes hold. I mean, giant schools of, 30, 40, up to hundreds of bass. I'm telling you, Miles Berghoff told me on Chickamauga, he's like, dude, I've seen schools of thousands of bass. Just blew my mind. Thousands? Like, dude, there's never, there might be one good fish a mile or two in the creek I'm trying to fish that might actually matter for the tournament. You're telling me you have a school of thousands? Like, that just blows my mind. So,
and especially when you have that massive a school and there's times a year where you can't get a single one to bite, where it's just like, you didn't have graphs on your boat, you wouldn't even know what fish are there. But like, there's times, especially on a pressured fishery, like Miles Berghoff lives on Chickamauga, where you can't get any of those fish to bite. It's kind of crazy. Before we get too deep, I apologize, Ken. I haven't even met you yet, dude. But
that's right.
To chat with you, man.
Yeah, for sure, dude. It's good to meet you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to sneak out for 1 second, but we're good.
Oh, you're good. I was like 10 minutes late.
No, you're good. So, that's cool. You guys will hopefully get to meet in person here at a tournament or something this year. Maybe it'll work out. But yeah. So we just went over this list, and one thing. I'll read you the list of where we feel our cons are and our pros, but we'll start with the cons because I was going to balance it out with the pro of trying to tournament fish via the River Bassin style. Clearly it works, but it doesn't work for everybody who tries it. And there's probably more lake guys in the top of the AOY standings every year, even though Jordan and I happen to hold AOY trophies. You know what I mean? We talked about the fact that the sample set and the way the AOY structure works, that really isn't it doesn't prove anything like, wow, everyone should be fishing skinny water and backwaters and rivers. It doesn't really prove anything, other than it can be done in those types of waters. It's possible is what we've proven. It is possible. But anyway, so here's our list. Ken, you can chime in and add a little bit of context to this.
Yeah.
So here's what we feel. Our pre-fishing, if you go and you struggle and drag your kayak or paddle a long way to get to a spot that you think is unpressured or not many people are getting to, it could consume an entire day or 3/4 of an entire day just to get to one spot to find out that potentially nothing is there. Just because it's a wild, unpressured spot sadly, very sadly sometimes, it doesn't mean there's giant winning fish there, unfortunately. So that's a con for our style. You can burn a whole day pre-fishing or half day or whatever and come up with nothing. And if you only have, 1 or 2 days to pre-fish, like a lot of people, it's just a tough thing to gamble on. It's real tough. That's one of the cons. It's not always a honey hole. And then the fish in general, there's a lot of creeks and rivers feeding lakes, and there's only so much fishable water up some of the creeks once you get to the point where boats cannot get, right? Which is what we're looking for, generally the kayak-friendly water, okay? But a lot of times, unfortunately, due to, especially in the southeast, other species, the northern strain spotted bass or red-eye bass or whatever, there's a lot of factors, or just the size of the creek. The ocean is smaller, if you will. It's not an ocean at all. It's a trickle compared to the main lake, which we're considering the ocean, right? So the bigger the ocean, the bigger the fish. A lot of times, unfortunately, they're just the size to win isn't there in every creek. There might be 1 or 2 places that maybe has the size in each tournament. It's a backwater or skinny water river or creek. It could be one, and you gotta find that one. That's not easy when you got 10 different creeks that could be and rivers feeding a lake. So that's another con, that the fish generally are smaller. Because the bigger the ocean, the bigger the fish. So you guys have a lot of times you're the biggest of all the fish are going to be in the main lake. That doesn't mean win tournament or catch those that overall maximum size fish, but they're going to max out bigger in the main lake. The other thing we thought was a big con is and this happened to us at Pickwick, Ken and I, and this has happened to lots of people before. But the weather, a rainstorm comes in. You've pre-fished in certain conditions where the river and the creek is low. Next thing you know, it's chocolate milk, and everything you learn in pre-fishing is out the window because it's not safe to navigate it anymore and fish it. And or two, it's too muddy to even it's just blown out. And then on the lake, it's probably murkier than it was, but it's not completely just you can't fish it anymore. You might have to change to a spinnerbait or a chatterbait or some other technique instead of a jerk bait, which is more of a clear water or whatever. You might have to change your technique, but the fish are still going to potentially be there. Plus you got your graph and you can see them and you can see the brush pile or whatever they're holding on, probably still catch them. So it's not like your whole spot's going to get ruined. So that's a con to that. And then another big one is, especially as these tournaments start filling out, like the Hobie Bass Open Series is all, capping out at 200. If other people show up on a small spot, nobody's winning anything. But on a offshore spot, if someone shows up and there's a school of hundreds of bass, it's not great. You don't love it, but you're not completely hosed necessarily. All 2 or 3 of the anglers that are there aren't completely hosed. And a matter of fact, you actually can fire them up sometimes. You can fire the schools up, which is important on a lake more than a river where they're just kind of a little bit more aggressive, opportunistic, as Jordan had said. The other one, a con, was the time of the year. You can catch fish in lakes, every, season of the year. Right now in the middle of the winter. As a matter of fact, back on, you go to Milliken's YouTube stuff for OH Ivy, it was the coldest days of the year in Texas when they were out there catching those giants on A-rig. So no matter how cold it gets, you can still catch them on the lakes. It's not easy, of course. No one's saying it's easy, but try going in the river when it's that cold and you got moving water making it potentially even colder. And there's no thermocline where they can get warmer, and there's, what I mean? It's moving water doesn't really, they don't, whatever. It's a little bit colder sometimes when you got colder rains and snow melts and stuff like that. So the winter is tough for an early spring for the rivers. So that was a con. And then that's pretty much it in terms of things we thought were negative. Now the pros are, you could put in all the work and effort to get to a far off place, and it might end up being that those rare times where it is this magical spot that, yes, nobody else found, nobody fishes it, and it's unpressured fish, and you're just this is amazing. So then the fish are smaller, con. Well, they are, but sometimes they're not. There's certain times of the year, even when, if shad are moving up the creeks or rivers or whatever, there's certain times of the year that some of those lake fish even move up those creeks and rivers, or certain places that there's just resident fish that are big up those rivers and creeks as well, that are big enough to potentially win a tournament because the bite gets tough on the lakes at certain times of the year too. So, and then of course, if it doesn't rain and the weather doesn't mess you up, that's the pro to that con. And then other people showing up, if they don't show up, you got it to yourself and it's easy. And then once the time of the year gets into March or whatever, late March, most places, well, in the South at least, and further north a little bit later probably, but the time of the year you don't have to worry about it once it gets in that warmer weather. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Those were our lists. But so what are you thinking? How do you want to approach this and talk about some of the pros and cons to maybe choosing a lake to fish a tournament as opposed to the river? What do you think some of your advantages, stuff you love about the lakes?
Yeah, I mean, to touch on a couple things you said too, like I don't really know if I agree with the point that there's smaller fish in rivers. I think they're skinnier. You could say that because there's not as much of a forage base at times. I think there's a heavier forage base out on the main lake versus the rivers. Like consistently throughout the year, you might find fatter fish on the lake.
Right, fat. We talked about that. That's funny.
Heavier versus length.
Yeah, we did talk about that. Yep.
In a kayak tournament, I mean, that point you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about finding fatter fish. You're just looking for size in terms of length, right? Because I think it's become a term now where it's like, oh, that's a good kayak bass. When you catch 20 incher that weighs like 3 pounds.
Yeah.
But I think it really depends on the time of year for me. But from a confidence and a comfort standpoint, I love being out in the main lake. The biggest disadvantage to that from a kayak standpoint is basically any spot you find or have found, most likely there's been like 30 bass boats that have already found that. And you have to know tournament day, what other local club tournaments, BFLs, whichever tournaments that might, because like Toledo Bennett for the Hobie BOS, Bass Champs was there on Saturday, and that was a 250 boat field. Then they had another local club tournament that day that was like another 50 boats. And then there was another actually local kayak tournament that I had no idea was even going on. They showed up to the registration. So there was a bunch of tournaments that you have to like, especially boat wise, if you're going to be fishing the main lake, you kind of have to take into the fact of one, it's most likely going to be on the weekend. So there's going to be pleasure boaters out there, but two, are there going to be any local club tournaments? Because chances are on those popular lakes that we go to, if you found a spot, there's a very good chance that's one of those boats already knows about it and it might be there. So that's why there's always that conversation of, for tournament morning, when do we launch? When would a boat tournament launch? What would that, you're doing the math, right? Of how long does it take me to get to that spot? How long, like what time would I get there? Where are they launching? How long would it take for them to get there? And that's why a bunch of us were actually kind of happy with the crazy wind on day one until we learned that Bass Champs could trailer for Hobie BOS. Then everyone's like, well, damn. Now we got to worry about these guys being in the backs of the creeks. Or like, because there's guys, in the south where they would have to launch. It was already like 4-foot rollers going to the south end on Toledo, which in a boat, when you're going with waves that are, 3 or 4 footers, that's extremely hard because you're going to be a good chance you're spearing waves. So guys might not even run south. So everyone that was thinking about going south was like, perfect, we're having no boats around us till you learned you could trail it.
Right.
Another thing with fishing offshore or kind of on that main lake stuff is those fish, not that they can't leave the rivers as easy, but they have a lot more room to move. Unless you're specifically targeting like a rock pile or a piece of cover, talking about ledges or just specific ditches and drains that those fish are sitting on, there's always in the back of your mind, like that next day, are they going to move? And you always have to remember, especially times of year where it's transition periods, you got to think, if I show up there, you have to have a backup plan of, am I going to go look for them further back into that drain, or am I going to push back? What are the weather patterns doing? Which way do I have to go if my school's not there to kind of, because on tournament day, you're trying to maximize your time. And that's another, I think, disadvantage to fishing offshore, especially in a new body of water, is the amount of time you have to put in to find those fish. Not that I think there's a similar amount of time and like energy exertion in finding river fish as well as offshore fish. It's just a completely different manner where as you do, you're running, you're running different creeks as in terms of driving, loading up, unloading, running different creeks throughout the day. Whereas like guys that like to fish offshore are pedaling 20 miles or using a motor. I think take the motor side away from it. It's a lot harder if you're an offshore guy with pedals Because obviously that's a lot of physical exertion to find those fish. So that's like kind of the disadvantages, and there might be some things I'm missing too. But for the advantages, for me, in my mind, not as many people are willing to, I think, put in that 20-mile day, pedaling and staring at a screen to find maybe 2 or 3 schools of fish. So while you're definitely still competing with the boaters, from a kayak standpoint, you might have a better chance of getting an area to yourself. Whereas, like you mentioned, you go to a river and there's 5 guys there, and it's 5 guys having to share that space. It can kind of be iffy. Whereas offshore, maybe if there's one other guy there, depending on what you're fishing, if it's a ledge, if you're talking TVA, I think you almost want 2 or 3 guys there to keep that fired, because then you're all going to benefit from it. Unless you're talking like June time frame where they're right off the bed, right to the ledge, and they'll eat everything that's in their face.
Right.
There's a bunch of different things, but I also, just for me being a northerner and a smallmouth guy, I don't know why, but I just love being offshore. The less bank that I can see, the more comfortable I feel, which is weird for a kayak mindset. You're more, I guess another negative here is you're more in the elements, for the weather that day. You can't get out of it when you tuck in, like when you tuck into a river, you can get out of the wind. Or you might even have some sort of a canopy if it's, if there's rain or whatever weather elements.
You
you're embraced everything when you're offshore.
Yeah. You bring up a good point too about, like all the bass boat guys, they just kind of know like, oh, it's easy. I can spot lock. I can sit right there. I can fish offshore. And there's a lot of them that do, but your tournament's only against the other kayak guys. So, it might be deterring people from going out there because they don't want to compete with the bass boat guys, but that's a different tournament. So it's like, if there's the fish are out there, and so what if the bass boat guys are catching some, or if they happen to end up on a spot, it doesn't necessarily like kill it. But a lot of times you will find a spot like Buddy Gross found that's offshore and or a live scoping the timber like Jacob Wheeler on Fork or whatever, Patrick Walters in the fall on Fork, situations like that. If the bass boat guys are doing it, that's fine. There's still 5 good fish out there each day to freaking win the tournament. If they're out there, so you just got to go do it. Like you said, most kayak guys are getting a kayak to think about like little, kayak friendly water, but, and they just don't feel comfortable being offshore in the weather and the wind and the situation like that. Plus they think the bass boats, but really that's where you're kind of thinking, well, that's cool, 'cause I don't mind it. And that leaves more for me is what you're kind of saying. And that's true. I think a lot of guys don't want to be staring at a screen, and they don't want to commit. Well, you said they don't want to commit to the 20-mile day. They don't want to commit to the same thing we talked about, Ken, with the river bassin style, driving around and putting in and just all that work and the effort it takes to just find those places. Yeah. You're doing it, Bailey, I know this because I've talked to you enough that you spend just so much time just graphing. People want to go fish. They want to catch fish and have fun. They don't want to sit there and scan a lake for, half the day or a whole day, just learning and graphing the lake, and then dropping waypoints on potential schools or brush piles or rock piles or whatever. Most people just don't want to do it. They want to catch fish. They want to go fishing. So I think you're right. I mean, it's a good pro for your strategy, because most people just can't mentally just do that like you're able to do. So, and you enjoy it. But I will say this though, what I meant is, you're right. It's obviously to some degree, we talked about the heavier fish are in the lakes, but the length is all we care about. We actually were making jokes about trying to come up with we're catching the LeBron James, the athletic fit fish. And you guys are catching the John Daly or whatever, the bigger, like Babe Ruth. Ken had a good example. I had a bad example, Santa Claus, but whatever. It's hard to come up with an athlete that was fat, dude. So anyway, I was going the opposite direction. He just eats cookies and slides down a chimney and gets drug around by his
offensive lineman.
There you go. That's what it is.
Receivers.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's got his Minn Kota reindeer up there, taking him around all day long, being lazy. But anyway, so
just let it go.
Yeah.
Just stop trying to survive. You're digging a hole deeper. It's not. Just kill it already.
Well, he moves around with the reindeer. That's his propulsion, and there's just the trolling motor. Anyway, so, but I do think that what I kind of meant was there's creeks and that are warm water creeks that flow into rivers. Into lakes that you can jump across and wade across and not even go anything over your knees, and they have bass in them. But that's my point is the bigger bass will never be in something that small just because, and then obviously the bigger and bigger you get, the bigger fish feels okay in there. You know what I mean? The deeper the holes get and the bigger it gets, the bigger fish tend to feel more comfortable and they get in there. So that's kind of what I meant by you got 10 or 15 creeks, man, you might have 8, 9, 10, 11 of those that most of the times of the year, they're the high end of the biggest fish you're going to catch in that creek might be 2 or 2.5, 3 pounds and probably won't win a tournament, even if you catch 5 of them for 2 days. But, but to your point, I think what you're saying is true. You definitely have the right rivers and creeks, with the deep enough holes and enough forage and stuff. Yeah, you definitely have the length of fish to compete and win for sure. But it's just finding the right ones and not wasting too much time in the ones that, but then again, it's hard because you can be surprised sometimes at what size fish ends up in pretty small water. And sometimes 5, 17-inch fish in tough times of the year will win a tournament for 2 days. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. And I think in a tough tournament where things are shaking out, like where 5 bites will go a long way, especially legal bites, right? Current is like, I think it was Rick Clunn that basically just said current is that negating factor of all factors, where it doesn't matter if, the water temperature is 10 degrees colder than the main lake. If it's moving water, those fish will eat anything because it's moving water. Current is that negating factor that will always take a pressured fishery and you can still get bites. So I think in a tough fishery or a tough tournament where, that maybe that main lake pattern isn't working, but you have some spring feeding into river and it's pushing water. I mean, that just seems like, we all like talk about this textbook, right? And I'm trying to get myself to stop reading this so-called textbook of fishing because every time I do, it screws me over. But what it tells you is to find current, and because that's what you'll find bites. That's one of the things like at the Possum Kingdom, the Bass Kayak Classic, where all that muddy water came in, and it's like main lake. I mean, I don't have forward-facing sonar at the time, but like I know some of the guys were catching them on it, but like I couldn't catch anyone when that mud ruined all my clean water until you found current. If you found some sort of moving water, that was kind of like, again, the negating factor that fish will just always be more alert, more active because it's more oxygen when that moving water is, in play.
Yeah, for sure. And then I like your point here about current, because current on main lake, when they start generating and pulling water on these lakes, it's faint. It's really not. I mean, sometimes it's noticeable, especially where it pinches down and narrows up, bridges, places like that, and it's very noticeable there. But sometimes it's not as noticeable, and but even the fact that it's there, because it wasn't before they, when they weren't pulling water, it wasn't there really at all. And then now you got wind coming that same direction, and they're pulling water, and water's coming in from upstream, and the main lake fires with the current, on points or wherever, where there wasn't current before. Because we've talked on this show before, Dr. Salmons or whatever, we maybe talked about the little fine cilia, whatever, the little hairs that are on the bass, and they can sense, current. That's how they know those little hairs, fall downstream, if you will. And that's how they know what direction the current's kind of coming from. But anyway, but that little subtle amount of current on the main lake, if you take that same amount of current under normal flows on a river, that's like the places in the long sections that are just deep and slow pools where I tend to just blow through because like they're not aggressive there. They don't really bite. So it's funny how that same amount of current, that's like the negative for me. That's when I'm like trying to get past and get through and get to somewhere with some more moderate current or swift current and rapids and stuff like that, where more aggressive fish. But to your offshore fish, that's like the maximum it gets, current wise, and that fires them up and turns them on. So it's just kind of funny how, I blow past that current in the river, and you're hoping that you get any kind of current like that in the lake, and that fires them up and turns them on. So
yeah, I mean, especially from when you're even talking like a main river or like a lake, it's different. A lake, if you can get any sort of wind, naturally your bite's just going to be so much better. There's guys that I know don't like fishing in the wind from a kayak. I prefer it, just being that I'm an offshore guy. Wind gets my spots turned up, and you get more bites that way. It's just kind of, again, going back to that textbook, right? Having some moving water. But like in a river fishery, the more when we're comparing rivers versus a main lake, any sort of current, say like take like a TVA, right? When you have fish that are offshore, the less the current, the more spread out they're going to be. The more current, the more bunched up they're going to be, which also makes it really easy for you in terms of graphing. You know which places to look for. To look right on those back sides of river swings. And if they're there, then that's going to be your pattern to run, which makes you not have to graph as much water. So you can kind of focus in. It may not be you're not cutting down the miles, but you're cutting down what you have to worry about focusing on. So you can run stuff a little bit quicker, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does.
So current just is a blessing to everybody.
Yeah, no, it really is. So I like this conversation. I mean, there's a lot of pros to what you do, and I'm super jealous when I see somebody winning a tournament just offshore, just sitting there and with spot lockdown, and they're just not having to burn any energy paddling or you know what I mean, like any effort. It just seems so easy. It's just or obviously in a Hobie tournament you got to do it yourself with the pedals and whatnot. And that's work. But in the bass boat world, I almost feel like, man, this can't be that. Those fish just can't be out there that easy, but they are. And that's definitely a big advantage and something I'm jealous of sometimes when I'm exhausted and beat up and have a sprained ankles and just cuts all over me, just beat up from the day, man.
Well, that's the enticing thing about, fishing offshore at kind of like what we're talking about here is you can find just one spot that has, 30 to 40 fish, or even just has 5 to 10 that can be all you need for that day. Whereas you got to go, a mile maybe, like you still have to put in, I think you cover more ground in order to find your limit for the day. Whereas you can wind up on one spot and in 10 minutes, you got your limit for the day.
Yeah.
Where that's the kind of, I guess, enticement to fishing offshore when you find that school. I mean, people that have seen it before know exactly what I'm talking about. When you see it, you're graphing and either on down imaging or your side imaging, you just see bloop, 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 bloop. And you're like, yep, we found them, boys. And your first cast, that first thump, you're like, all right, game on. Like, it's just, there's that feeling, I guess, when you figure them out or you find them and then you can replicate it.
Yeah.
It's just
satisfying. Yep.
Yeah. Very satisfying.
No, for sure. I think at the end of this conversation, we're kind of at, a point where we all kind of agree that the best anglers at their craft, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, right? And tournaments can be won, I think, by the best anglers at, the lake anglers, not just offshore. I mean, obviously, like your docks, whatever structure that's on the bank, the lake, grass, whatever. It can be won on, by a lake angler that's got a ton of skill and talent. It could also be won by river and creek anglers that are at the top of their game too. But I feel like it's pretty darn equal. You know what I'm saying? It's not like one that really is over the other. The only thing that really could separate somebody is when is somebody that has is the top of the skill set in both. And they actually then also know when to go river and when to go lake, and putting a whole season together of that, is tough because again, our AOI system, it's not super, telling of the story because we can drop some tournaments. So if you took the river guys and I only stuck to rivers and I couldn't drop any, or Jordan Marshall, who I don't know where he is. He still hadn't gotten back on. So his phone may have just broke or his computer completely. I even got a text. I haven't got a text from him. I don't know what happened to that guy, but I mean, he was at his girlfriend's house. So, there's no telling.
Maybe his time limit was up.
Maybe what?
His time limit was up. She said, "You're done. Come on, let's go."
Yeah, it's yeah.
She's like, "Nah, some joker with a podcast is coming on here. I don't want to be around when he comes."
There's no telling what. I don't want to get in.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what I'm pulling from this is, like we did a pros and cons list, and it's fun to compare that stuff. But what it seems like to me is that you have to, like, obviously fishing is more than just catching the fish. That's the part that everybody likes. That's the part that everybody enjoys. That's what sells the lures. That's what sells social media, is holding that fish. But really what designates a river guy like Drew or myself or whomever versus a lake guy is, like, the key point is they enjoy that process, and you have to enjoy the whole process, because then you become an expert at the process, and that is the key differences in decisions that you make during that process that puts you in the position to catch those bigger fish. So like hiking through like trudging through land and hiking through little rivers and putting in and like making tons of casts and like reading current and like dodging stuff. Like that's what we're into. That's part of the game for us, in my opinion. Whereas like for lake guys like yourself, if you're part of the game is your screen and seeing those subtle differences, reading on your screen and what's going on underneath the water and getting them to react and firing up the school. I don't know what any of that feels like because I've never done it. But it just doesn't sound like that seems, not, this is the only term I can think of, but boring. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know it's not. Once you get out there and you do it, I know it's not boring, but to learn it sounds awful to me. Where I'd rather I'm an active guy. Like I don't like going on vacation to the beach. I don't like sitting on the beach and just sitting there and like I could take a nap in the condo all day long. I'm cool with that. But like I'm bored if I'm sitting on the beach. You know what I mean? So it's like I like to be doing things. So like moving water is making me do things while I'm looking for these big fish. That's just kind of my take on that. Like it boils down to what process do you enjoy better to put yourself in an advantage to catching those fish, because they can be in both places.
Yeah, Ken, I think you and I will be great friends because I also hate the beach. But no, I'll be honest, like I do enjoy it, but I will say with an asterisk, I enjoy it when it pays off.
When it works.
Yeah.
Times where you're like, there's times where, when you're graphing, you are 98% of the time looking at a screen with nothing there. And you're just sitting there self-doubting everything you're doing until something pops up. Well, when you say you're graphing one river swing and it finally pops up and you're like, okay, maybe I'm not that crazy, but that's like 1% of that duration. But there's times there too where you go and you have a spot that's 3 miles from any ramp.
Yeah.
And you go 3 miles to that spot. You see the condition, see where it's at, and you're like, it clicks in your head that this other area will be firing off because this one sucks, but it's 5 miles the other way. And you're like, all right, well, this sucks, especially for crouch. Because
I guess that is a major pro for river kayak fishing.
Right.
It's always an adventure.
There's
always something that's cool that happens, or a story, whether it's not so cool, that happens every time.
No doubt.
So whether you're catching fish or not, there's something to talk about afterwards. Other than I couldn't find them. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, and the other thing I just thought about that's for kayak fishing for the offshore game is, in a bass boat, you can have a milk run. Doesn't matter if you need to drive 10, 20 miles. You can just go and hit all these brush piles and spots super fast, pull the drop the trolling motor, hit it, move to the next one fast. In the kayak, you gotta basically take an arm of a lake or, a section that's, like you're saying, Bailey, within a certain mile radius. I don't know what would be that number, maybe 3 or something like that, 4 at the most, I guess, if you're, and just kind of try to graph as much as you can in that range. I'm saying like in that area, you have multiple spots to hit in that area. Yeah, you can certainly launch up and go to another spot, drive further away, but and all day long, you're pedaling and you're paddling, you're covering like a lot of water, even though it might be maybe it's, the radius is 4 miles. So the center of it, so maybe it's 8 miles total, whatever on either side. But you get what I'm saying? Like you can't just run as fast as you can, hit the spots as fast as you can. In a bass boat, they have to be a little bit more concentrated to fish offshore to hit multiple spots, like brush piles on Eufaula, for example. You can't hit them all. You got to have like one area that's close to a launch and hit a bunch. And then if you exhausted them all, load up, go to another area where you can do the same thing, launch, and then hit a bunch. I feel like that's a little bit, you can't do it quite the same way you do in a bass boat. So that limits you a little bit.
Oh, it definitely limits you. Yeah. It's one of the things I hate about the day, or like the day leading up to tournament day, is trying to not completely making yourself on a schedule, because I think you don't want to do that and force yourself to make preconceived decisions, because you still want to obviously fish the moment, but like you still want to know, like, hey, if I get here by this time, how long is it going to take me to get to this spot? And if I have this much time left, can I hit this and this? Like you're still trying to weigh out those, like, I guess more of, and this is something that I'm still at fault for, that I really need to work on, is spreading myself out too far, especially in the kayak, because there's times where, Drew, I fish a lot of mix throughout the year, especially around here where I fish a lot of kayak tournaments, but then the very next day I'll go fish a boat tournament with a buddy where it's completely different in terms of, like, if I'm going to go rowing 2 miles this way, it's going to take me, 30 minutes. Whereas in the boat, it'll take me 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where it's trying to decide, like, I can run all this stuff. I found all this stuff in practice. Like, I might have all of us in one creek, but how big is this creek? Like at Toledo Bend, some of these creeks are massive. Like they're 6 miles long.
Right.
And that was one of the things I faulted, that I really was disappointed about looking back at Toledo, was I spread myself out too much. The first day I went, I made a 45-minute, quote, we call it a run. I don't really know what else to call it besides exactly running. But, and I realized that the wind was wrong. The weatherman was wrong. I said it was a north at 20, but it was actually east. So I got 3 miles into this pedal right off the bat to go to my best spot, and the wind was wrong. So you're like, well, didn't plan for that. Then you have to make decisions on backup of what to change when you're going to make that. It's just one of those things where it's like that I was disappointed about spreading myself out too much, because I spent more time probably pedaling that day than I actually did fishing. Yeah. And that is never a situation you want to find yourself in.
Yeah, and a lot of people, we're talking about like pedals specifically with those Hobie events, but a lot of people, I think, fall into that same trap when they drop a trolling motor or something on their kayak and they don't have that experience of now being able to get to other places quicker. They add too many waypoints at that point because they think they can zip around, and they spend their whole time motoring around looking at everything and not actually fishing.
Good point.
Yep.
Like, oh, well, they're not biting here. I'm going to pop over there. Oh, now I'm going to pop back over there. Now I'm going to pop back over there. And you're just basically just going on a joyride, and you're not actually concentrating on trying to get them to bite at some point.
It always comes down to decisions, doesn't it? That's what every winning bass angler, any tournament, they always say. It's like, this decision is what made it. And it's the truth, man. It really is.
Yeah, and that's just one of the biggest things I'm still working on. And like, I appreciate you getting me on here, because like I'm a nobody. I haven't done anything like big in the kayak game. Like, I'm not like the Rolando or Cody Milton or like Adam Reiser that are these sticks offshore. I'm just a nut from New York that likes to graph and catch smallmouth. But I'm still trying to learn this. When it comes, because I know I have the skill set to catch them and catch them good. It's the decision making and the strategy of the kayak tournaments that I'm still struggling with.
I'll say this though, you and I talk a good bit, pre-fishing and whatnot, and you've just had some tournaments with a little bit of bad luck. Like you've caught giants pre-fishing and they just didn't pan out in the tournament. You know what I mean? Like I know that it's there for you. It's coming.
You mean 3 for 3 on the national tournaments that I have fished?
So, pretty much. Because Possum Kingdom, you had this school and you were showing me pictures, and it's like you're making it up. They're on the board. You show me the pictures and they're huge.
Very familiar with the pre-fish curse.
Yes,
dude, it sucks. Like
it does.
It's come to the point where like I just after leaving Toledo, I'm just like, I'm never gonna get excited for another practice ever again. If I catch a giant, I'm going to leave the area and never come back, because it means they'll be gone by tournament day.
Yeah, that's true. Because you called me, Bailey called me, and he was like, "You'll be proud of me, Drew. I'm actually sitting in a backwater in Toledo Bend right now." Now it was near like more of an offshore spot you were kind of, focused on, but you'd found some fish that moved in there, and it was pretty cool backwater because it was kind of closer to some main lake stuff anyway. But and you saw lots of big fish and you were catching them. And so, I mean, you've been on fish at every national tournament you fished, like you said. It just on tournament day didn't quite work out. And that's just, given enough times, obviously enough tournaments, and that's, that's going to even itself out over time. But
yeah,
anyway.
I mean, some of it is definitely like letting those stars align. And when it's the saying of when it's your time, it's your time. But 3 times in a row, I think it definitely falls back on me just making a bad decision. So that's something I got to go back to the drawing board of. And maybe it's just time. Maybe it's just getting the experience out of the tournaments under your belt. But that also, that same thing is probably happening to 50 other anglers too.
Yeah.
That are on them in practice. And it's not really an excuse. It's just more I have a lot to work on.
Yep. So when is the next national tournament for you?
Lake Eufaula, the Hobie BOS, end of April.
Okay. Jordan, who. It's a shame you couldn't be on here to say to Jordan on this show, because he literally dropped off. We don't know what happened to him right before you came on. But anyway, he's going to be at that event. So
I'm going with alien abduction.
Alien abduction. Yeah, that's very well could be the case.
I like that reasoning better.
The what thing?
Said I like that reasoning better.
Yeah, that sounds like could be possible. But yeah, he'll be there. So you'll see him there, I'm sure. And then I'll be. You know what's funny is I might be fishing the. I didn't sign up for that one, and it filled up, and I just was not going to. It wasn't on my plans. But I'm going to try to maybe fish KBF Potomac at that time because I think a lot of the good anglers, are over there at the Hobie BOS. I'm going to try to go slide into the KBF Potomac potentially, and hit that one because I think it'd be a good chance to maybe get some AY points over there. So because it's also a tough fishery. I don't think a lot of people are, it's not considered world class anymore or anything like that. It used to be a lot better, but we'll see what happens with that decision. But good luck over there. We'll be following along.
That one.
Yeah, I mean it's fairly close to us, Ken. You and I, it's only like 5.5, 6 hours. It's not that far away. And Bailey, it's fairly close for you too, all things considered, closer than you follow. But I know you're chasing that Hobie trail, and we'll just have to see what happens. We'll follow along. We wish you the best as we wrap this up here. Anybody else have any other comments? I got to get ready for a national tournament. I'm leaving tomorrow, tomorrow morning. So I'm trying to get to sleep and get out of here in the morning.
Real soon, Drew.
Yeah, that's right. The Classic, right?
Yeah, I'm not fishing the Kayak Classic, but I'll be.
But you'll be at the Classic, right? So I'll see you there. Yeah, that'll be cool. Ken will be there too, so he'll see you there.
Can you go to the Classic too?
I'm not fishing the tournament, but I am coming down to hang out towards the weekend.
So Friday, probably at the show at the expo. Well, maybe we'll run into you there. And if you want, we already plugged your podcast, but is there anything else you want to say or any other thing you want to mention before we get you off here for a lot of the viewers and fans that
I think really just the biggest thing, if people out there are podcast folk, we get Drew on the show a bunch. We get a bunch of people from regional guys that no one's ever heard of but are sticks, and then some bigger name pros, and we get some not bigger I guess topic. What I'm trying to say is we get some good topics that we talk about to try and teach. It's more of Andy, my co-host, and I, and Deacon, we do a business segment, but we try to basically get guys on that can teach us, and so we're learning while people are learning with us. So it's not really more boat or kayak oriented. We definitely have certain episodes that are geared towards each of them. We even have episodes that are pros versus cons. Drew has been on multiple episodes like that where we talk about that kind of stuff. But podcast aside, I started a new series called Chasing Hardware, which is basically me and my, like we were just talking about here, me trying to get better with these national kayak tournaments and trying to qualify for the Tournament of Champions. I started a new series called Chasing Hardware, where it's just dedicated to improving, learning, and obviously chasing in the win. And that's on the Serious Angler YouTube channel if you guys want to check it out. The first episode uploaded last night from Toledo Bend. So
that's exciting. I got to watch that. You sent me a little sample clip one day, and it looked awesome. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to be doing something like that this year as well. So it's not going to be out quite as quick as your stuff, but that's cool, man. Definitely excited about that. Before we leave, I do want to show this comment from River Smalley's on. He was saying competing against folks on the big lakes like St. Clair and Simcoe made my online monthlies interesting last year, which I assume he's saying he's competing with them, given his screen name here, handle, River Smalley's, that he's competing against them on rivers for smallmouth in that same probably general region, I guess, Midwest or whatever. So he's kind of saying I can hang with him if I make the right adjustments. He knows he can win. So it kind of proves our point and kind of puts a bow on this podcast that it can be won even on, lakes like those, which are world-class. They got footballs. They call them footballs, and maybe his fish aren't quite as fat, but for length, like our kayak tournaments, it's possible. So he kind of shows our point there. It's possible in both scenarios. You could be a Bailey. You could do Drew and Ken and what Jordan does, or like Bailey and Adam Reiser or whoever you want to use as an example. But that's what I love about our sport. It can be won in any potential way, and even more than bass boats, we have that option to go even skinnier and further than they do. So it's just a different dynamic where just two complete opposite worlds are colliding with a chance to win. That's what makes it exciting. So
yeah, especially with locations like Simcoe and St. Clair, which to everyone's knowledge, every information that you can accrue unless you've physically tried fishing the rivers off of it, everyone thinks you have to be offshore. You have to go graph and find those schools of fish and use your electronics. Whereas, it's not a weight tournament. It is length. If you go in those rivers, they're going to be a lot easier to key in on, a lot easier to find. And again, current, they're going to be, it's the negating factor. So as long as the length is there, you can easily keep up. If not, go on a run. Whereas a guy might have a spot, but he can't get there with the wind. It could be,
Yep,
could be a good strategy. You did it on Champlain.
Yeah, I did. I worked on Champlain. Didn't quite win. It was one offshore. Obviously with Travis von Neumann, he did find the big school of smallmouth that held up. But again, it's like a win in tournament fishing is not winning. It's cashing a check or being consistent, or high finishes, cashing in the top kind of 10%. To me, that's winning. So even if I don't win, I know that I can compete. Anyone at their top.
Winning's winning, and cashing a check is winning.
Yeah, exactly.
While we're wrapping stuff up, obviously Jordan fell off or whatever, but we did get a chance to have him do any shout outs and stuff. So I know he does have his new sponsorships and stuff like that. I think Cashin was maybe one of them, but JD.Marshall Fishing on Instagram, and just search for Jordan Marshall on Facebook. At least you can get started following him there. So go check him out and definitely support him as well. Just a shout out for him since he was unable to do so for himself.
Good call, Ken. All right, well that's it, man. It's a wrap, guys. Wish me luck. I'll be on the road in a snowstorm tomorrow, heading south. So
drive safe, buddy.
Wish me luck. This is not a tournament. I'm excited about it, but it's not a fishery that suits what we're talking about here tonight with what I do, my style. So it's going to be a challenge, boys, but I'm still going to give it a whirl, and we'll see what happens.
Well, regardless how you do, I'll have a beer waiting for you at the Classic.
Love it. Thanks, buddy. Night, guys. See ya. Peace out.
Living the current.
That's right.